in light of the fact that we just marked last week the 80th anniversary of D-Day, when we were fighting that earlier evil, and now we are back here in the 21st century fighting something in some regards not dissimilar, we have to point that out and let that lesson that we thought we learned in the Second World War be drummed home again. So I just wanted to point that out. This is so hideous. This is so almost unbelievable, except that it is only too believable, that I really feel it's incumbent upon each and every one of us, and of course I include myself, to point this out to people when we are talking to them, that this is what this war is about. It's about erasing the identity of the Ukrainian people. And one way that these monsters are doing it is by stealing their children. I'm getting really worked up because this is a very powerful and emotional topic for me. So anyways, I don't have to convince you, I know, but I just wanted to reinforce that particular point. So thank you for allowing me to speak, and I'll let you continue.
Thank you. Sorry, Nancy. Can you answer for a second? I got wrapped up in something real quick.
Yeah, and Martin, I very much appreciate you bringing that aspect up. It's that one of the reasons why basically child snatching on an industrial level is one of the facets that is against the genocide convention, is because of how monstrous a crime it is. And I think that's the hardest part for most of us to get our hands around, is how can Russia even think that that's okay when they have signed on to those agreements decades ago, because of what came out of World War II. And I think that's one of the reasons why it is so compelling, and I'm glad that it is getting more mainstream media coverage and feedback. Because for a nation to do this against another nation is horrific. And many times, like the Argentina scenario, is people can look away from that and go, oh, okay, well, that was related to a coup and a junta, and it's all internal civil war stuff, and we'll stay away from it. We'll put our heads in the sand and not look at it. But this is an aggressor nation invading and stealing the children of a smaller nation next to it. That it can't be ignored. It's not a civil war. It's not brother nations, even though Ukraine was absolutely peaceful before this. That wasn't enough for Russia. And that's where I will still consistently come back to the step in the peace plan that's associated with justice, because justice has to be part of the outcome for Ukraine to ensure that Russia doesn't do this to Ukraine or to Georgia or to Chechnya or to, I can go on and on from there, or to the Baltic states. If they are able to do actions like this with impunity now, they will continue to do the same thing that they have done in barbaric history through both World War II and for generations before that as well. So I completely understand why Ukrainians basically said, no, we're not putting up with this. We're done with this. And more power to them for it, because this stuff is monstrous. And Prince, I scared Martin away
No, you
too.
didn't. Martin, Martin like drops down when he's done talking, and he
I do that too.
yeah, and that's just the way Martin does it, and that's just that nothing wrong with that. You and I will hang out on the speaker panel. How many people have we had, that have fallen asleep on the speaker panel? And that's actually something that I enjoy, and it entertains me at times. When Scruff, over a year ago now, when Scruff first started talking to us, he would talk to us until he could not keep his eyes open anymore, and he would fall asleep on the space. And there was one time he literally fell asleep while he was talking, and he started, like, snoring, and it was so cute, and I just muted him and left him there. And Mockers came up in the morning, she's like, "Oh, Scruff is here." And I'm like, "No, he fell asleep. Do you think we should put him to bed?" And so we ended up, dropping him down gently. But, we always joke then about about putting putting Scruff to bed. And there was a time just recently, within the last couple of weeks, when I think it was Mockers and Will came up to co-host, and and it was I said, and they were like, "Hey, how's the night? How's it going? Looks like you got some good people up here on the speaker panel." And I'm like, "No, I think they're all asleep. None of them raised their hand or said a word, and I don't know how long, and I think they have all fallen asleep. So you got a good speaker panel, but they're sleeping." And that's just the way it goes. But I have been
Yeah, and the only way you can test that is basically say their name first loudly and then ask them something and then say their name again and see how it works.
yeah, it doesn't.
Dan, what do you think about that approach, Dan?
No, I'm awake. I was just busy. I didn't want to kill anybody passing meds. But yeah, you can mention genocide every single day, 24 hours a day. It needs to be heard. I have no issue with that. But other than that, yeah. So how bad are the booms from last night? I missed a lot of it because my internet was all screwed up. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I can hear you
Yep,
just
we sure
fine.
can.
And how bad were the booms from last night? There was like an S300 and S400 taken out, and in Crimea, I believe, and that's good news. Very, very good news. I have sort of stuffed the nest with Beefeater stuff. Beefeater, and I may go through this here in a little bit, but Beefeater has a very good thread, of course, on the sanctions that were just released. He also has a good daily roundup of Russian Telegram chatter, which a lot of it has to do with the money. And then he did also send me a link to, if you're, well, wanting a, if you want to listen to the sanctions update, he has that in a podcast format, um, that he makes for his visually impaired followers, or people who may want to listen to it rather than read it. And I hate to tell that to people because I want them to keep listening to Maria Report, but I do think there's probably valuable information in there. So so I put those.
Yeah, Prince Heather, I hear you on that. Do you know how difficult it was for me to listen to a music concert from Cultural Forces while the space was on? But I did it. Well, I got through an hour and 15 minutes of it. So I still have a little bit to go.
Well, I did it this morning, so it can be done. It just, you have to sometimes turn the volume farther down. I do that after I'm done co-hosting. A lot of times I'll come right back up onto the speaker panel, but I'll turn the volume way, way down while I'm concentrating on some other things, which I know is bad, but it still happens. But then every now and then I'll hear somebody say my name, and then I can turn the volume up. That catches my attention enough. And every now and then something will catch my attention as far as a word or two that makes me say, "Oh, I want to pay attention to that." And we as co-hosts are a little more than a little. Most of us, I would have to say, are patient, and there have been times where I'll put the volume back up, and I sort of missed what the point is, but I knew it was a topic that I would have something to say about, so I asked them to summarize it really quickly, and then I can give my input, so that works really good. But I see that Boxed Wine has come up and would like to talk to us. So Boxed Wine, go on ahead.
Well, I feel this overwhelming need to tack back only briefly to a time way, way in the back where in times gone by, close to 2 years ago now, as I recall, when a certain person on Maria Report, who I think was, if I recall, was occupying the host, not the co-host, the host seat, and fell asleep and was snoring, and nobody could do anything about it. And we were just all, loving the snoring. Anyway, anybody else remember that? And that's all. Now you can get back to like real stuff, but I was just chuckling.
I do remember that. I remember that very clearly, and there's absolutely nothing we could do about it. There have been a couple of times when host phones have done interesting things. There was a time not all that long ago when somebody put a host phone on the counter in the bathroom, and then proceeded to take a shower and get completely ready, and then came back to the host phone, and we're sitting there literally yelling into the host, yelling, trying to get the person's attention, all kinds of things, and nothing was working. So that wasn't all that long ago. There is a list somewhere, perhaps Nancy has it, of the number of who exactly has snored on the Maria Report. She may not have it going back to the beginning, but I think she has as a partial list at least. And yeah, and there have been some very interesting incidences with snoring and other activities, let's say. And, the goal of the co-host is, I'm sorry, I don't want to be rude, but the goal of the co-host is to not do something embarrassing like flush the toilet or go to the bathroom and have a hot mic, or those kinds of things. But they have happened. They have happened, and we just sort of giggle about it, tease each other about it, and move on with life.
Yep,
If
because
there's
we
a
all know sticky mic moments and things like that are always going to happen at the worst possible time.
Oh, they absolutely
Nothing
do.
worse than trying to, oh, let's see, eat food, yeah, go to the restroom, have a drink of water to help yourself out, and then have the mic opening on its own, or not being able to close it when you thought you did because, oh, let's see, Elon's having one of those fun days. And then I think we had some of that yesterday because they were doing updates like, oh, taking away your ability to like things and have other people see that you liked it. So I don't know what the guy was thinking, but yeah, I don't think that's the most popular one. But yeah, sticky mic syndrome is always a big challenge for us too. Go ahead, Dan, and then Linda.
I was just gonna add about when I'm at home, a lot of time I'm bad. At my age, I forget to flush. I reaching back at on the handle is like, I don't know. I just forget. So now I use MriyaReport. I blame you guys. I said I couldn't flush. I was on the panel, which is a lie. I'm bad.
Yes, yes, yes. But you know, you do used to who talks a bit and who doesn't. So, you know, for I have literally gone into the house, gone to the bathroom, and come back out to the garage and got all seated and comfortable and caught up on messages while Will is having a Willabuster. Um, so, so you know, these things happen. You get used to those things. Um, go ahead, Linda.
Uh-oh, sticky mic again? Go ahead, Linda.
Oh, yeah, sticky mic.
There she is.
Okay, so yeah, here I am. So okay, so two things, Dan. Obviously, whenever you come up to speak, we're going to ask you immediately. First thing, have you flushed? So that's number one, and number two is I think we have a need for kind of like a what do you call those old fashioned library cards? You know, all the school libraries had these wooden cabinets with the library cards we could look up by author, by book, by whatever, right? Maybe we need one of those for memes, for like, I like this tweet meme, or maybe I don't like this tweet meme. I don't know. Just a thought. I'll get out of your hair now.
Thanks, Linda. Becky, go ahead.
Hey there, can you hear me?
Yep, loud and clear.
Well, it's good to listen to you guys, and I heard you guys talking about the recent post, and I figured that rather than just laying in the weeds, I'd come contribute. Hey, Prince, how are you?
I am doing okie dokie. I'm doing okie dokie. The temperature is
Yesterday,
rising in the. Yep, sorry. Yeah, it's getting better. So go ahead, Becky. It's good to see you.
yesterday, we had a guest on. I can't remember who it was, but there was conversation about the number of U.S. companies that were still doing business in Russia, and I think the number 300 was thrown around. And Beefeater poked his hand up and jumped up and was recognized, and he said that's way too low of a number. Those maybe that's reasonable for the large companies that are recognizable, but actually there's smaller and medium sized companies that are doing business, maybe not directly, but through um, shipments that go through other companies like Kazakhstan, and he named a few others. And so I just did a quick zoom through this, the first one that you put up in the nest there, and on the third page, maybe it's the fourth page, on this topic in particular, it's super cool. So I'm just going to read two paragraphs. Russia relies on complex transnational supply chains to feed its war machine and enable production. Similar networks also attempt to evade sanctions using convoluted schemes to move money and other valuable goods and assets. Today's action targets more than a dozen of these types of networks, designating more than 90 individuals and entities across Russia, Belarus, the British Virgin Islands, Bulgaria, Kazakhstan, the Kyrgyz Republic, the PRC, Serbia, South Africa, Turkey, and the United Arab Emirates. So I thought that was super cool after listening to him yesterday, that this comes out today. Then there's lots in here getting directly at China and what they're doing. So that's what I want to contribute.
Good deal. And yeah, there are the secondary sanctions. Being able to hit those secondary sanctions is really, really important. And I haven't had a chance to look at that at all. But the being able to cut those off, being able to cut those off is extremely, extremely important. And because that is the kind of thing that ends up still making them money when they shouldn't be. So, Nancy,
Yes, ma'am. I was just pulling up the article on state.gov, but I've run out of time again. I haven't had a chance to look at I was looking for a few specific individuals or specific companies as well too. So I will do
ah
that after
ah
our session.
okay, okay. So, all right. Well, I thought perhaps the other thing, I was thinking about why would they have done it today? Why would they have done these today versus like tomorrow or something like that? If it might have made a difference. But the one thing that I did notice today is that the U.S. and Ukraine will sign the security agreement tomorrow on June 13th, according to Jake Sullivan. This was stated by Jake Sullivan. We all know who he is, in a briefing on board the presidential plane on the way to Italy. And he says, I'm going to announce that our negotiations with Ukraine have ended, and we will sign the agreements tomorrow. So, according to Sullivan, the presidents of Ukraine and the United States will hold talks on the sidelines of the G7 summit in Italy and sign the agreement that will clearly state that our support will be long term and guarantee our cooperation, particularly in the area of defense security. So that is good news.
Yep, and the G7 summit is on tomorrow and Friday, so it's the 13th and 14th. And so that's also a very sensible time to lay all this stuff out in a nice, ordered, straightforward line. Makes it really clear when you look at the events and the timing together that way.
Well, I think the messaging also is important here too, because people were really up in arms about for a while there about Joe Biden not going to the peace summit, and and we know that he is sending Kamala Harris and Jake Sullivan um, to that, and of course, um, Joe Biden will be going to a fundraiser in California with a bunch of big stars. And as somebody who gets texts from Joe Biden's campaign kind of stuff, if you're not sick of seeing Julia Roberts, George Clooney, to this morning it was Carole King, then you're not paying attention. I look at it, I was like, oh my God, not again. And and so that is an important thing, but highlighting the fact, I think that they have met several different times. They've met on D-Day. They're meeting again tomorrow. They met again at in I think in France. No, not in France, someplace else. They had a anyway. They've run into each other a few times in the last week or so. And so having this right before the peace summit, having Joe Biden sign this with Volodymyr Zelensky just before the peace summit, I think is also a good sign. And I really like getting Kamala Harris involved in the in the in the process, because I haven't seen her in this process a whole lot, and so I'm glad to see that happening. And so there's been some really good messaging coming out of the Biden administration. I'm sure that there are people who would disagree with me vehemently on that, and that's fine. But I think that there has been some good messaging coming out regarding this. I also saw Jake Sullivan made a statement today about war crimes and about what is happening with children in Ukraine could amount to or do amount to. I don't know the exact wording to war crimes, which is, of course, a very, very important statement. I want to see the word genocide, but we all know that. I want to scream the word genocide from the rooftops. And their resistance, I believe, their resistance to using the word genocide does nothing to absolve them from their responsibility and their duty to prevent, as laid out in the Genocide Convention. Dan.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, yeah, and not that it was so much, but this is my sort of question comment. Yeah, I constantly think, I hope when all is said and done, I hope in the future we can re-examine how we effectively combat genocide or catch it, like Gina says, before it starts, when we see stuff going on in certain countries, and call it out for what it is. I'm just hoping some things will change. I'm hoping things will change with NATO and rules, and when things get to the point where it's like it is, allowing the NATO organization to redirect their rules to affect the people or persons or regions that they're cut out to help in the first place, regardless if they're a NATO or not. Yeah, I hope they re-examine everything very well and come up with a few quicker, faster, better solutions. The genocide thing is the thing that bothers me the most. The fact that they're not even labeled a terrorist state by, NATO countries or Western society. I just can't imagine it. I can't wrap my head around it. But that's all I wanted to say about that. But yeah, I'm glad Kamala too, she's getting involved more. She needs to be out in the limelight more and more exposure, yes.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. So, I'm just sort of glancing through this. I thought perhaps I would read a bit of the Beefeater thread. I know it's a really big hit when Mockers does it, so maybe I can like channel Mockers and make it a big hit. Not the thread about not the big thread about the sanctions, but a smaller tweet here about the roundup of Russian Telegram chatter, because those are often very interesting. And the reality is there are wonderful people like Beefeater who go and read the Russian Telegram, so you don't have to, and so I don't have to, because it would make me want to. I don't know. It wouldn't be good. Let's just put it that way. I would, yeah, I would not want to do that. So I appreciate Beefeater doing that. What do you think, Nancy? Should we do that?
Yeah, it sounds like a capital idea.
All righty then. Well, another roundup of Russian Telegram channel. Read the disclaimer, please. Oh, where's the disclaimer? I don't know where the disclaimer is, but I'm sure it's here somewhere. But reality is disclaimer is this is Russian stuff. This is from Russian Telegram. We'll see what it says here. Russian Norvik Bank sets new dollar exchange rate. The bank buys at 50 rubles and sells at 200 rubles. There's 110% devaluation in the past 24 hours. Nancy, that seems a bit extreme to me, doesn't it to you? 110%?
Did you see those graphs that basically show it just kind of plunging off a cliff? Yep.
Yes, I did. I'm watching the lemmings fall, right? Yeah, that's exactly. We had a exhibit at the zoo that I were here in Portland when I was younger, about lemmings, and it just it was actually sort of a rather entertaining one about lemmings falling off the cliff. And it was like, "Are you kidding me? Okay, I know kids need to learn this stuff, but ay ay ay, ay 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 ay." Anyway. All right. The ruble will cease to be freely convertible currency, and there will be serious volatility in the gray market. Exporting companies will not be able to sell dollars and euros at a favorable rate, and withdrawing currency from Russia will become expensive due to commissions and risks, says SIPA researcher Alexander Kolivar. So, yes, these things are not good, are they? The Moscow exchange shares fell sharply after the news of the US sanctions. Speaking of the cliff, there it is. That is the cliff that we are talking about, I think. And of course the valuation of the dollar. Those are the things that that are have everybody's attention. How's that for an answer? My timeline is filled with what Russian ruble doing, and yeah, I think there are a couple of jumps off a cliff in that. So yeah, on June 13th, the Central Bank of the Russian Federation will change the start time of trading on foreign exchange market and the Moscow exchange precious metals market. They will begin at 9:50 Moscow time. So I assume they're doing that to try to make things a little bit more favorable. I don't know that it'll work. I don't know much about their exchanges, and I don't know how that could be beneficial, but in some way I think they think it can be beneficial, but I just, knowing absolutely nothing, have a feeling it's not going to be productive. What do you think, Nancy?
Yeah, I think the Moscow exchange is going to go through some things tomorrow. I guess I would put it that way. I was just looking up their normal time for opening is 10 a.m. to 6:40 p.m. Moscow Standard Time. So this means they'll be opening a little bit earlier, and well, I would say those first few minutes are going to be fun. I would not want to be on that trading floor.
They're going to be fun. I wonder if it's a test to see. This is the test of the the emergency system. We will see if we will remain open or if we are going to shut really fast. I think that might be a possibility. I don't know.
Yeah, that could be as well too. And well, I learned I was reminded Terry Fella did a great job earlier today on making certain that we understood the proper dictionary definition of defenestration. And well, I don't know, that could be where Russia gets to. That is the action of throwing someone out of a window, or the action of dismissing someone from a position of power or authority is usually how it's more used now. But I I foresee some Russian windows in the Russian future here. So we'll keep an eye out for that too.
Ah, yes, Russian windows, Russian tea parties. There could be many things that go along with this. Oops, you fell. Sorry about that. Um, yeah, I don't. This could be interesting. We're all sort of waiting for something drastic to happen. I don't know that this is it. I don't. I have no clue. I'm not in a position to analyze if this is it, because it's not something I'm good at. But, as an onlooker who doesn't know a whole lot, it makes me, rub my hands together and say, now what's going to happen? And fortunately, I'm usually up to see what's going to happen in Russia when they first get up in the morning. So we'll see. We shall see. All right. In addition, the Bank of Russia has decided to suspend trading in the Hong Kong dollar from June 13th. So they are not going to be trading in the Hong Kong dollar. That is interesting, I think. Taking the currency out of play may have an impact. All right. So, due to the introduction of restrictive measures by the United States against the Moscow Exchange Group, exchange trading and settlements of deliverable instruments in US dollars and the euros are suspended. So no trading in US dollars, no in euros. According to the Central Bank of Russia, is basically what that is. So no euros, no dollars, and no Hong Kong currency, which I'm not sure what that is. Do you know what the Hong Kong currency is, Nancy?
No, I'd have to go look it up.
Yeah.
Don't have it off the top of my head. Nope.
Yeah, I'm not too worried about it. All right, at the same time, trading on all other exchange segments and on exchange instruments in rubles and other currencies will be carried out as usual. Transactions in the US dollar and euro will continue to be carried out on the over the counter market. I would think that that may be beneficial to them. I don't know. If they could take in more dollars that are worth something in other countries and exchange them for rubles, which are worth not even toilet paper. So yeah. But I see IT fella came up. Let's go to IT fella.
I am sorry I missed the earlier part of this conversation. Hong Kong trades dollars, the Hong Kong dollar. I don't know what the rate is at the moment, but it's generally fixed somewhere around 7 Hong Kong dollars to a US dollar. But I'd have to go look on my screen and look it up. I trade currencies for myself, so I have a Forex account. The ruble, contrary to what somebody said on here a while ago, is not at 200. I mean, it may be on the street, but in my from my currency broker, it's still sitting at around 98 to the dollar, which is, it's basically just above a penny a ruble. And that's actually up a little bit over the last week and a half. It's been trading around 90 to 92 for the last few months. So it's basically just fluctuating just under a dollar. And I attribute the fluctuations to the Russian central bank intervening to push it up. And I think that's why it's up around 98 now. It started out the week around 88, and they managed to push it up a penny today. But that was all before the U.S. shut the exchanges on them. So basically, anything you have in Russian securities or cash, it's not that the U.S. exchanges are saying it's valueless. It's just that they will not trade it, whether it's stocks, bonds, rubles, whatever. They're not making any decisions on what it's worth to you. They're just not going to trade it for you. So effectively in dollars, it's worth nothing.
It effectively renders it not quite illiquid, but a lot more difficult to make liquid compared to
Exactly.
normal. Is that right?
Yeah, if
Yeah.
you're doing anything associated with dollars through a U.S. bank or exchange, it's not liquid, it's frozen. The banks and the exchanges are not allowed to trade it. But that doesn't mean that, like, Hungary may still be trading rubles, or Bulgaria, or from what I hadn't heard anything about the euro, but from what you were commenting there, I take it the EU the EU central bank has taken the same position as the U.S. Banks, the U.S. exchanges. They're not trading in Russian assets anymore. But I don't know. I haven't seen that in the news yet.
Yeah, that I don't know.
So you should. I don't know. As far as I know, unless the European Central Bank has stopped trading in rubles, you should still be able to convert rubles to euro. I would guess, given the difference in the exchange rate between dollars and euros, that it'd probably be running somewhere around 100 to a euro, or maybe 102 to the euro, somewhere in that range, if they're trading it. So with the U.S. central bank shutting down trading in Russian assets, it would not be a surprise if the European central bank went along with that. The whole thing, what Putin doesn't realize is that in the grand scheme of things, when you start, pitting one central bank against another, the Russian assets don't amount to a whole lot in terms of global assets. When you compare what the EU and the US and China have in terms of real assets, what the Russians have is what they have in the ground. But as far as financial assets, they really don't, it's just not that big an economy. I mean, if you add the US and the EU together in terms of annual GDP, Russia's like a tenth of that or less. So, for them to disappear from the global markets is only going to hurt those that are foolish enough to be holding Russian assets. It's not going to affect the value of the dollar or the value of the euro. As long as you're not holding Russian bonds, you're not going to lose anything there. So basically, as far as the finance, it sounds harsh, but in terms of the way billionaires look at things, if the Russian economy disappeared, it would not really affect them a whole lot. And that's one of the things that surprised me about the way Wall Street's been dealing with Russian companies. I mean, with U.S. companies in Russia, it surprises me that there are any, because it's just not a stable environment to run a business.
Yeah,
And
exactly. I agree with you there. The country risk is
much bigger.
Almost, yeah, exactly. The country risk before February 22nd, 2022 was, well, people I think were undervaluing it at that point.
Right.
But pretty much as soon as Russia crossed over to attempt to take Kiev, that's the point when basically all of the businesses should have gone, okay, my country risk is
Right.
now undefinable. I
Right.
need to leave.
Should've-
And so many didn't, because they're like, oh, this will blow over.
Right. And
Yeah,
now,
right. No.
and you can see that now what Putin's doing is, his most recent announcement on it was that he's going to be seizing all the foreign assets in the country. So if you have a U.S. business over there, it's now Putin's business. So by waiting around to make that extra 0.1% for your bottom line next year, you've lost it all. And that's what I don't understand, is the Russian economy is so small compared to what the Fortune 500 generally make, that for those companies to still be doing business there, it's like they're not making a significant amount of money on there on a good day, much less now. So why stay? I mean, and you've seen the big ones like Halliburton and Baker Hughes um, will probably be okay. I know they both announced that they were pulling out of Russia last year, but I also know that they didn't. And those two companies, if you are running an oil business, Baker Hughes or Halliburton are going to be involved because they're the ones that operate oil pumps. I mean, the whole refineries, oil extraction, the whole 9 yards. That's their business, and they do that globally, and they do it really well. And they don't really, between the two of them, they don't have any significant competition. So I can see why they may have wanted to stay in Russia because Russia has, it's a global gas station, and they make big money on it. But outside of that, if you're running a Wendy's or McDonald's, I just don't see it as worth your while to take the risk.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense, IT fella. I did a quick look. I am not seeing any news out today that that would indicate that the EU is yet taking the same position as the United States. However, you're right. We have regularly seen them follow suit in some sanctions categories. And I am sure that this will be a topic of conversation of the G7 tomorrow and Friday. That part of the timing is not surprising, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Also, interestingly, our Fed Open Market Committee just wrapped up their 2-day meeting and announced our interest rate today. The big deal today in the markets was the FOMC making their rate decision on the U.S. dollar, and they chose to leave it flat. They're trying to squash inflation, and at this point, we're basically at the top of the interest rate market that we're going to see for the dollar. Um, and once again, this is like this, I think, the third meeting in a row where they've chosen to hold rates flat. So the betting on Wall Street has been when are they going to start easing and how much. And Wall Street was caught off guard last month because everybody in the financial markets, the game is to front run the Fed. And what happens when you lower interest rates, the value of your currency drops. So, and the dollar right now is at a multi-year high. It's up at the top, up a little bit today, but not, still up over 104. It made it up to 105 in a little bit, but it's still hanging out way up there at the top. And they decided to hold rates flat today, but they're indicating that they do plan to start bringing down interest rates sometime later in the year. And the big betting game is whether they're going to do it 2 times or 3 times or 1 time. And it's starting to look like probably 1 time would be my guess, and that not till the end of the year. But that's a guess. They could do it twice. And it's because our consumer price index actually dropped on the latest monthly reading. We dropped from 0.2% to 0.1%. And that's a monthly reading. So we multiply that times 12. It indicates that our inflation rate has dropped from the low 3% range, possibly into the 2% range. The Fed won't make a move based on 1 month's CPI figures. They'll wait and see. They prefer to see that repeated through a quarter to see whether or not it's an aberration or a trend that's starting. And when they see it as a trend, then they will go ahead and cut rates. But that's why I think the earliest we'll see any kind of change in interest rates would be September, and that's not likely. More likely October or November. But anyway, that's what's going on now. The ECB meets next week for the same reason, to set the cash rate for the ECB. What they're talking about with that, it's the fundamental interest rate that's behind all other interest rates in the EU, or in our case in the States.
Yeah, I was going to say, and that's the ECB is the European Central Bank, right?
Right. So they control the interest rates the same way the Fed controls the rates in the States. And you have this Chinese central bank does the same thing for them, and the Russian central bank does the same for them. You know, we've seen the Russian central bank. You know, I knew things were going off the rails the way the Russian central bank has been jerking around interest rates. And the latest was they moved interest up to 16%. That doesn't mean you're going to get 16%. It means that's the lowest. That's what they're going to charge a AAA rated banking customer. So let's say you want to take out a mortgage in Moscow, you're not going to get it at a 16% rate. You're going to get more like somewhere between 20 and 25%, because their central bank is collecting 16%, and all the major banks that they deal with are then going to want to be collecting 18 or 19%, and the banks that are under them are going to be charging 20, 22%, and so on down the line. So I don't know what mortgage.
Yeah, and I'll just I'll interject real quick, IT fella, just to try and simplify a little bit. Is what you're describing is similar to like the US banking system's prime lending rate,
Right.
which is what your best customer is going to get, but not your car loan is usually going to be more expensive than prime rate, or at least it used to be. Mortgages are a different animal in the United States because of effectively the market subsidies effectively
Well,
there.
but they're
Although
also
it's been closer, the long-term rates have often still been lower than those prime lending rates, and that's uniqueness, I think.
right, but they're all based on the Fed's overnight rate.
Yep.
All of those rates, when the Fed changes its interest rate, everybody else adjusts theirs accordingly. So yeah, it changes mortgages and car loans and your credit card payment. The amount that you pay in interest on your credit card. Anything that's interest rate sensitive will shift according to what the Fed's overnight rate is. But as an individual customer, you're never going to get anything at the overnight rate. But what you're getting will be based on that rate. So we're at the top of it. I haven't been looking at the housing market, but I'm assuming that mortgage rates in the States are probably rather high right now. And they will be winding down over the next 2-3 years. So,
Yeah, I know that they've been at an atypical high for an extended period of time. Just
right.
Just from I live in a community that's still being built out and is not cookie cutter homes, so it's usually construction to perm type lending, which is means traditional mortgage rates. And yeah, we have a lot of people complaining because they just they can't borrow as much, so
Yeah.
they're having to adjust their expectations.
Now is not the time to buy a house.
Yeah,
So
definitely not the time to build one. Not in the United
same
States
thing, yeah.
anyway.
Because all the materials are probably expensive. Because the companies that trade in materials run loans to back their construction, to back their material costs, and they're having to pay more. So they're passing that along to their customers. As rates come down, those rates will come down also. Um, the thing to do is wait until our interest rate bottoms out, and it will be probably 3 years, could be faster, but when our interest rates bottom out, that's the time to buy a house. And the way to really do it is that's when you want to lock in a fixed 30-year mortgage. If you do that,
Yep,
banks would
exactly.
love to sell you a 30-year mortgage right now because they'll be fat. Um, it's top. I'm sure banks
Yep.
would love to lend you anything right now and fix it.
And I did want to pass on a point of clarification on the change in the dollar exchange rate that Prince Heather mentioned earlier. That was confirmed as Russian Norvik's bank's rate. That was confirmed that that particular bank, maybe not the entire system, maybe not all of all the banks yet, but Russian Norvik Bank set their new rate to 200. So just so that you've got that.
Wow, I was wondering where that came from. That's interesting.
Yep.
Smart of them to do
Yep.
that, but because without
I guess,
the
well, they didn't want to wait to be last in the market to do
right,
it, right?
like
If you're going to adjust your rate, you want to be first.
I trade through
It doesn't.
a currency
Mhm.
broker, so I can look at any exchange rate, and it's still showing about 88, 89 today. But from what you're saying, that will probably change overnight rather dramatically. And the bottom line is, if the U.S. is out of the market, it's going to take a lot of other people out of the market too. And basically, the U.S. is saying e-rubles or toilet paper. And we'll see how. That's why I'm curious. I'll be curious
Exactly.
to see what happens with the European Central Bank, because they more than
Yeah,
likely.
you're going to have a lot of markers to be watching tomorrow
Yep.
morning for sure, IT fella. It sounds like, and the one thing I've been reminded of in the background, and I don't have the standard SEC statement in front of me, but I would say that we are not a financial advice channel, so take what is said here as individuals' opinions, and your mileage may vary personally. And there's a whole bunch of other gobbledygook that gosh, probably when was it? 92, I think was the last time that I had done um any SEC licensed activity in the United States. My license has since long expired. So I used to know that pattern right off the top of my head. I don't anymore, but just to let you know that your mileage may vary, and the opinions that are described here are opinions, but they're the opinions of reasonable people.
Yeah,
There you go.
exactly. I'm not offering trading advice here, just to be very clear.
Exactly.
Just an observation.
Exactly.
Yeah, I do have 3 exchange licenses, but they're not in force here, and they're not currently active with any brokers. So I'm
It's
just
all personal investing opinions. Yep.
exactly.
Yep. And I see Will Teal came up to the speaker panel. Will, how you doing in Upside Down Land? Will's not fully engaged yet. It
No,
looks
he is
like.
not. No, he's not. Not fully engaged. And
Oh, it's full. Oh, it's full. Just my mouth is full.
oh, yeah. See,
That's just my timing. There you go. I'm going to have barking dogs for about 2 minutes, so bear with me.
Yeah, well, no financial advice from me. Other than I will say that poor Russian soldier that got scammed out of 3 million rubles. To be fair, I take money from my regular job and invest it in the stock market to expand my money. So good on you, fella, but probably don't give money to girls on the internet is my advice. Don't not only on this channel, don't believe anything a girl tells you on the internet about investing, or a boy. But so yeah, the main point you made there is what's really important, IT fella, is that it's not so much what the ruble is listed as exchanging at if you can find somebody to buy it. It's finding buyers. And the beauty of this move is because the US sanctions have moved this way, Russia's actually isolating itself. It's stopping the trade in settling things in dollars and euros. And that's good because there's no need to try to enforce it, right? If they stop trading, they'll isolate themselves. And that's the best thing because it doesn't matter. Like during the Cold War, it doesn't matter what you say the ruble's worth. What was the ruble worth in 1995 or 1989, Nancy? You don't know because nobody cared.
United States or Europe, right?
Right. So that's what's key. The other minor clarification is that Halliburton and Baker Hughes have left the market in Russia, but Schlumberger has not. Schlumberger changed their name to SLB because apparently we all can't speak French, or they wanted to hide the fact that they're a French name company, or it's
so
just.
is their nickname Slob or Slum? I'm not sure.
Well, scum. No, because Schlumberger first announced that they were going to leave the market with Halliburton and Baker Hughes, the U.S. companies, but and Schlumberger said that they've stopped taking new equipment in, and they're not bringing new equipment into Russia, and that's kind of important. But then they reversed that. They're probably doing everything business as usual now because they were caught out for it and said, yeah, we're not going to leave the Russian market because with both of their major competitors having left the market, Schlumberger sort of can write their own price now. And while there are other well-serviced companies, Halliburton, Baker Hughes, and Schlumberger represent the vast majority of the market. So not having all three of them would be very good for Ukraine or for the world, for everybody to just not have sanctions, just enforce sanctions by not trading with Russia, doing what's happening essentially today with the ruble. But so that will impact them not so much in the refineries where they do some service work and they do turnarounds and inspection work inside the refineries. But the real place it's going to hurt Russia is in their well production. Anytime you slow down or shut in a well because of production, and I'll note that Russia was found to be cheating on its OPEC target today, so it's going to get more and more pressure to close in wells because it's producing too much crude. And when you close in a well and then you try to ramp it back up later on once demand gets higher, it's not like a water tap. It's not just going to turn back on immediately. In most cases, especially this crude that we're getting out of the Siberian crude, isn't going to just start flowing freely as well. So you normally have to do what's called workovers on your well. Chemical stimulation, hydraulic stimulation, also called fracking, and other downhole techniques to be able to produce more oil or produce oil at the previous rate you were, as well as directional drilling, which Russia does not have an inherent capability. So new wells are going to be difficult, and workovers of old wells are going to be difficult. And that will mean that Russia's production of crude oil should suffer over time, which is a good thing. But Schlumberger is staying there because they'll pay their people a lot of money. I mean, like $3,000 US dollars a day. They'll probably be paying specialist engineering companies that can fix problems for them. So that'll be a big deal. But the currency being isolated is actually better than the currency exchange rate going up. They're both good, but I actually think isolation is better because you won't find people cheating. It's like just stop trading with Russia, and then we don't need to worry about sanctions because trade's not happening. So it's always better to just have companies vote with their feet than wait around for the government to put pressure on them.
Yep, that makes sense. That makes
Yeah.
sense.
Absolutely, that is a good thing. That is a good thing. So, IT fella, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Will for reminding me. I was off before. I forgot about Schlumberger. SLB is Schlumberger's ticker on the New York Stock Exchange. Is where that one comes from. So, but of course, that won't be trading on the New York Exchange anymore.
Yeah, it's just the simple way, like Kentucky Fried Chicken became KFC. Schlumberger has an S, an L, and a B in it, and their email addresses for all you. I'll dox all the SLB employees out there. All their email addresses are .sl or at slb.com. So yeah, they're a worldwide
It's their domain.
service company. Yeah, but apparently Schlumberger was people call it Slumberger and Scumberger and whatever. That people got the francophones got sick of hearing their name mispronounced, so they just went with SLB.
They're huge. So what happens when Putin decides to nationalize Schlumberger?
Well, of course, he can nationalize all the assets that he wants, but well services companies aren't primarily defined in their value by the some of it is the equipment, but they're not primarily valued on their hardware, their equipment. They're primarily valued based on their expertise, and unless he imprisons and puts those folks forced labor camps, which is not beyond the realm of possibility. They did this during the Soviet Union period, but unless he wants to go that route, they'll have a difficulty replacing. But Schlumberger, will make a king's ransom while the money is good. But as you say, the problem with Russia isn't how much money you can make in Russia. I can go back over to Russia today and make $3,000 a day until the FSB arrives. But the key is I can't get that money out of Russia anymore. Right? How much? Who gives a shit how much money I've got in U.S. equivalent dollars in Russia if I can't move it through a U.S. bank back to Australia so I can enrich the workers' paradise? It's of no these false economies. When you isolate your economy, they don't make much sense in relation to normal economic analysis.
Yeah, you certainly don't want to be getting paid in rubles at this point.
And they require that now. You cannot negotiate a contract inside Russia that's not denominated in rubles.
Interesting. So is that sort of like what what India is doing to Russia?
Russia is making itself the kind of economy that India is, but what Russia doesn't have that India does have. Russia doesn't have 1 billion consumers to keep its GDP going. Its GDP in Russia is only based on two things: oil and gas export, timber export, and arms manufacture.
Gotcha. All right. Oyvind, I see you have your hand up. Go on ahead.
Yeah, I've been waiting for Will for several days, almost a week now. A week ago, Will, the Novoshakhtinsk refinery was hit, and in one of the channel I follow here, they were reported that that hit resulted in 1.5 million ton lost by the Russians. But such a big loss must mean that the fire will be on for several days.
I think that was misreported. I think what they lost is production capacity of that amount, not that amount of oil in and of itself.
Yeah, but another one said that the production capacity they lost was 7.5 million ton.
So that refinery in total, I believe, was about 7.5 million tons. It did shut down for a few days at least. It might be shut down totally now, but because it's not a massive refinery, right? It's not a massive refinery, but what it is it's a very new refinery. It was only built in 2009 or commissioned in 2009, and it's got fuels through what look like 2 trains. But the other thing that it's got there that is not important until it is a bitumen manufacturing facility. Not many refiners have bitumen manufacturing facilities because it's kind of a waste product, right? What they normally do is take the heavy and run it back through the cat crackers and break it all up and make it into gasoline, which sells for a lot of money. And bitumen doesn't normally sell for that much money, except when it does. And road building season right now, April through August, is road building season. And if you don't have enough capacity to make bitumen everywhere, the price of bitumen will skyrocket, or they'll have shortages. And this bitumen manufacturing facility is right on the edge of the place where they want to repair a lot of roads for improving logistics in Luhansk and Donetsk. So that's why I think this refinery will be might be strategically significant. Is they've hit it 3 times because it's close, but this time of year, bitumen manufacturing is important. We in the Kernell refinery in Australia, where I used to work, periodically, right at the beginning of road building season, our bitumen used to be almost the most valuable product in the refinery on a cost basis. So I think that's what happened here is they hit a refinery, probably derated its capacity significantly, shut it down for a period of time, because the beauty of that strike was not only did they hit the column, the distillation column, they had a significant fire going on the ground, which means they knocked out some of the either the pots where they boil everything, the flash drums, or some of the stuff on the ground caused a significant spill and a pool fire, which would have impacted other facilities in there, in particular the bitumen manufacturing facility they talked about.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
But what have they done for me lately? I haven't heard of a refinery strike since then. Actually, the one refinery that did have a problem was in Belarus. You remember when they hit all the refineries in a row, and they had caused significant logistical problems in moving product around inside Russia. Not Rosneft, Lukoil's refineries lost so much capacity of gasoline production that they started to have to import 50 megaliters of gasoline a month. They were from the refinery in Belarus that's been hit, because that refinery in Belarus not been hit. No, sorry, not been hit. No owls, no drone strikes, not in Belarus. It just had a regular fire. It looks like in a heat exchanger, probably in their in process heat exchangers, and it looks like it was just a bunch of insulation and combustible material on fire. But anyway, it causes a shutdown and a bump, and couldn't have happened to a nicer refinery, because that's the one that sits on the confluence of 3 pipelines. 3 pipelines from Russia that thing gets fed by, and it produces a metric shit ton of gasoline. It's an old Soviet refinery. If you're into refineries, go look at this Belarus refinery that got the incident the other day, because it's about 2.5 times the size of the city it's next to. I mean, it's a real estate. It's got absolute bucket loads of real estate. It's complex. It's got all the unit operations, but it probably hasn't been updated since 1959 when it was commissioned. But it does. They produce massive size things, but their efficiency is sometimes poor, and their complexity is a problem. So nice place for them to have problems in refining capacity inside Belarus, just coincidentally.
Couldn't happen to a better guy, huh?
That's too bad. IT fella, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Will real quick. Will, do you have a handle on how much of Russia's refining capacity has been taken out at this point? Because I know it's like about 2 weeks after they started hitting the refineries, it came out that they had lost something like 16% of capacity. And the press has just been announcing that as a figure ever since, although I know they've hit other refineries since then.
That's right. They have hit refineries since then, and they have also repaired some of the damage at some of the refineries and put them back into. I think that 15% number is still probably solid, because the early refineries that they struck with the older drones didn't tend to produce a level of sympathetic destruction that the later ones, these Luti drones that have the split back tail, they carry a really, really, really effective, as you'd see on the Sukhoi 57. That was a Luti drone. So they produce a really high impact It's a small bomb, but it's a very high impact shrapnel bomb, and on sympathetic targets or very weak skinned things like that Su-57, they can do a lot of damage, but they wouldn't do much damage at all on a concrete structure. So the key is make sure that you use those Luti drones in the way that they have. They're really, really good dive bombers. So when you see them coming in on these refineries to do the strikes, they'll be angling in at like a 70-degree attack angle. They're really good at dropping down, so that they make sure that the kinetic impact of the drone itself and the shrapnel bomb all create the conditions where they can get a good puncturing of lots of steel equipment that holds hydrocarbon, hot burning metal. Boom, you get a sympathetic fire. And the other thing they've done, like Razan in particular, is they've been using double taps, making sure that the second, third, fourth drones that go in, if they have already struck a column and it's on fire but not sufficiently damaged, they'll hit it again with a second drone, and make sure that the blaze it's well ablaze before they leave. And this strike in Rostov on Don, that most recent refinery strike shows that in great detail. They've got a very good fire going, a pool fire on the ground as a result of that, which is exactly what you want to go for. When they strike tanks these days, unless it's accidental or just debris falling on them, they tend to strike lower on the tanks and near where the piping and appurtenances go in, so that they can cause much more damage than just striking the top of the tank and causing a fire there. So all in all, I'd say with what they're repairing versus what's continuing to be hit, I'd still say they're that 15% number is probably close to true still. And I'll note that it must still be at least partially true, or very close to that number, or maybe worse, because Russia hasn't lifted its ban on export of naphtha, gasoline, or diesel fuel.
Very good. Thank you so much, Will. Oyvind?
Yeah, another commodity that Russia is losing a lot. That's trucks. I checked up the production of trucks in Russia. It's back to 2022, but I guess it's almost the same. It's about 183 trucks, new trucks a day, and we have seen figures where they're losing up to 80 a day. Are they also importing trucks from China or something?
Yes, they are doing some import, but the other thing they're doing is and that, you know, we're probably not going to eliminate Russia's logistics capacity by knocking out trucks, because they haven't even scratched the surface on the number of trucks, old trucks that are in storage that could be refurbed. Now we have seen some very, very old trucks, probably because they were ready to go. Those ones from 1936 in Avdiivka. You know, you wouldn't normally bring a truck like that into service because people would laugh at you, as we did. But they are using basically any truck that moves, but they do have a very, very large store of old trucks that they can refurb and put back into service. So uh, we we probably won't see Ukraine run them out of trucks, but nevertheless, 60 a day is a big numbers, and we've seen lots of numbers like that. It'll cause localized problems, but I don't think they're going to run out of trucks.
Yeah, but if you're putting a 50-year-old truck into service, the tires will not hold for many kilometers.
Well, I think one would.
They might run out of big tires.
Well, I was going to say, I would think that they're replacing the tires before, not letting them run on 50-year-old tires, but who knows? And it's an interesting point. Will they run out of tires? But can they get those tires from China? And I think the tires from China is probably more the point. Isn't that what we were seeing towards the beginning? Is using really crappy tires from China that were causing all kinds of problems. So yeah, Will, do you know? And there's been a lot of tire fires. Seen a lot of tire fires. Maybe another way to help take out their fleet. What do you think, Will?
Well, it's another way to cause them problems. Of course, I don't think we're probably well, Ukraine is probably not capable of eliminating trucks from Russia. And are they going to have localized problems with tires shortages? Possibly. But I don't think it's going to be the Achilles heel that takes Russia down. What'll take Russia down, Achilles heel wise, is going to be what nearly took Ukraine down. You know, you can't fight an enemy off with harsh words. So if you run out of tubes, or you run out of artillery shells, or you run out of tanks and that sort of thing, and you're just doing meat waves, as we saw, unsupported meat waves, as we saw in uh, uh, Vovchansk, you're going to get what we saw, and that is loss. So I think that's probably important, and I'm sure that China is providing tire manufacturing capability to Russia already. I mean, I saw Chinese tires in Russia in the early 2000s, so there are clearly manufacturers that are supplying that sort of thing regularly, and I'm sure they've just ramped it up.
Yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense. And yeah, I mean, to not they won't run out, but making things temporarily difficult is definitely something I think that is in play, because you do see, you know, they're taking out, what was the record? I think 101 vehicles and fuel tanks. Yeah, they'll eventually be able to replace those. It's just like taking out a piece of railroad, right? That temporarily takes down that piece of railroad, but they fix railroad pretty quick in Russia, from my understanding. So they'll get that fixed. Same with the oil refineries, but it creates a disadvantage for them for a period of time, so that they have to adapt or wait for ammunition. And okay, so if they're waiting for ammunition and fuel to be delivered because they've taken out so many trucks in a specific area, that gives Ukraine a temporary maybe advantage to be able to do some specific attacks to to take out more of the artilleries and APCs and tanks and things like that. Am I thinking along the right lines, Will?
Yeah, I mean, so they're not going to cause systematic overall Russian logistics problems, but they will cause localized problems, and that's why this refinery close to Ukraine makes a big deal. You know, if you have material that is not made at every refinery, like bitumen, and you knock out the refinery that's newest and is closest to where they need that bitumen, you're going to cause a short-term logistics problem. You know, will they cover it? Yes, but are they going to have to spend time, effort, and stress that could have otherwise been used elsewhere during a time of war? Yeah, so it's a good thing, but I don't think it's going to be the thing that takes them down by itself.
Very good point. Very, very good point. All right. So have we talked enough about oil and lube? I think there was somebody who wanted me to ask you a question regarding lube, but I can't
You
remember
just
what it
want to say
was.
the word.
Well, you know, I just, you know, I like to tease you about the word lube.
Admit it. Your inner 13-year-old boy wants to say the word lube. Just say lube, 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 lube. Get it out of your system, Prince.
Well, now it sounds like bloob, 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 bloob. And so we could say bloob, 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 bloob till the cows come home, and it's just saying bloob. Now, I don't know if bloob is a word, but it is now. And Nancy's probably rolling her eyes and smacking her forehead, going, "Oh boy, I'm stuck between two."
Yeah, I can only do so much with the background noise. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Here I am stuck in the co-host seat with two 13-year-old boys. So anyway, and one of them who knows nothing.
And I can't bail you out.
Yeah, you can't bail me out. IT fella, go ahead.
One last thing on oil, because Bill mentioned it. You know, OPEC made a deal with Russia. I think it was back in, I don't know, March, April. They wanted Russia to cut 500,000 barrels a day from production. And that was right around the time, or just before actually, Ukraine started hitting the oil refineries. And what interested me there is Ukraine isn't harming Russia's oil production at all. What they're doing is taking away their ability to refine the oil. So that means that Russia's building a glut of crude against not having refined products. And basically, instead of cutting their production 500,000 a day, they actually had to increase it 1,000,000 a day because they weren't refining about 500,000 barrels a day. And so I've been waiting to see when OPEC or somebody in that arena might say something. And from what Will said, it sounds like that's finally starting to come out.
Go ahead, Will.
Yeah, you're right. It was actually they agreed to the OPEC plus cut just before the second wave of these refinery strikes, the even more effective ones. And yeah, as we said at the time, you know, it's going to have four major effects on Russia, none of which will have anything to do with the gasoline price in America, but it will absolutely cut their euros and dollar money that they can make internationally for export. It absolutely causes them logistics problems, as we've seen inside Russia with having to buy gasoline from Belarus, and shortages that they've had, restrictions on export. So logistics and moving product around. The third thing is that, as you said, they, while agreeing to a cut of 500,000 barrels a day, they have a surplus of 400,000 barrels a day due to a 15% production cut, which means those two things aren't going to work. And so we predicted at the time was they'll end up having to dump crude onto the market. Putin came out and said he wanted, in vague language, he said he wanted them to cut back on production, shut in crude wells, but but saying that vaguely and not specifically giving a number to each of the companies that's producing. They all just assume somebody else is going to do that, right? And that's what happened. And so their excess in crude into the market is great. It's huge. It is, and OPEC Plus just announced yesterday that they're well exceeding their target of what they wanted to have. Now they did cut production. OPEC Plus did overall, but nowhere near the amount that they needed to. And in fact, it's all been exceeded greatly, helped by Russia. But because we said they'll either need to shut in production or they'll need to cheat. And what they did is they cheated. We predicted they'd cheat, and we predicted that the OPEC partners would predict that they're cheating, and they started cheating right away. So OPEC Plus parties cheating on their oil, their production cut limits or their production limits is good news. OPEC is coming apart at the seams because they can never enforce their restrictions to try to keep the price of oil high. And what's oil trading at today? IT fell about $80 a barrel for Brent.
Yeah,
So
78. Well, 78 for WTI.
okay, so $78 for West Texas Intermediate is a very good moderate oil price. It's price of oil isn't high, folks, and there's a major war going on, and there's still a major restriction of traffic through the Red Sea. So none of what Russia's attempted to do or OPEC's attempted to do in relation to restricting supply or creating this volatility so that the price of oil spikes is occurring. And I can tell you one other thing, long term, this is a short term sort of effect, but I regularly, excuse me, I regularly attend the Australian, there's a major oil and gas conference every year in Australia, and it's typically in Perth. And for the first year ever that anybody could ever remember, all of the majors, Woodside, Chevron, Impex, all of them, all of Shell, all the big operators. Operators normally set the price of the price of a stock of an oil company is not based typically on what the assets of the company are worth. They're mostly driven by what their reserves are. And reserves are how much oil they have identified in the ground that they have a capability of removing, but hasn't been removed yet. Their oil reserves. Where are we going to go next for our next barrel of oil is typically what drives an oil company's price, its stock price. And so you'll see when, the price of oil goes high, exploration starts up greatly everywhere, and everybody tries to go find more reserves. Exploration and production go up. Exploration, drilling, and seismic activity go up greatly. That isn't happening this time. For the first time in history that anybody could remember at the Australian Oil and Gas Conference, all of the major operators, all of them, are now talking about how to get the best value, get the most value out of each barrel that they do see, because nobody is looking at doing a whole bunch of new exploration now, because the truth is we're finally starting to see some drive in Europe and America and the bigger markets of people moving toward renewables. So the pressure is coming off the oil price demand wise to a point where most of the oil companies, at a time when we would expect them to be seriously ramping up capability for production and doing lots more exploration, aren't doing that. They're shifting the focus of these companies to being more efficient and getting the most value out of every dollar or every barrel of crude that they do produce, rather than finding a whole bunch of new crude. I think that's going to be significant if it continues 2 years, 3 years, as the future. If this takes hold, it could change the pricing calculations of all these oil companies, and you'll start to see the most efficient operators become more valuable than the ones that are less efficient. And sovereign risk will also come into play, I think, significantly, where you're going to see oil companies that have production facilities that are trying to run efficiently and cost effectively, and they're in safe, quote unquote, safe places rather than places that are have more sovereign risk. I think those companies are probably going to be more valuable. But of course, like Nancy said before, I'm not offering any investment advice, just observations.
Very good. I was looking for something here, Will. This is something a little bit different. And this is not the one, I don't think.
Well, and in the meantime, while you're looking, I can jump in with something that I've been looking for and have not yet been able to find, but I think it is time to put some more pressure on. So I'm going to keep looking. Is back in 2022 and 2023, some United States state pension funds, including Florida, had investments in Russian businesses. And Florida at that time did not divest from those companies. And the state holdings included investments in Sberbank of Russia, which is the country's largest lender, Rosneft, the Russian energy giant, and the country's third largest company, and Magnet, one of their top grocery chains, among others, it says. I've found pretty much everything except what the heck are you guys still invested on? I know that in the last 2 quarters, those companies are not on the list of prohibited investments, and that last year, Florida lost $200 million in investments in Russia. And it's like, okay, what are you doing? What are you doing now, guys? And I can't find local press coverage on it, finding very little in the media. And I'm wondering how many other US states still have Russian assets in their pension funds that are probably going to be screwed here pretty soon, pardon the French. Any ideas? Will, IT fella?
I don't.
I don't know how much it is, but yeah, it is going to hurt Wall Street some. But again, the total amount of Russian assets held in the States in terms of pension funds and stuff is probably very small because of the risk.
Yeah.
I'm
Right,
sure,
and the distribution overall is pretty small when I look at the total portfolio for the state, and I look at, their percentage that is in foreign investments versus domestic investments, for
right.
example. I can see there that it's small. So it's really more a matter of principle, in particular, since I still remember as a student in Florida that they had at one point early on still had investments in companies that were doing business in South Africa during apartheid. And that changed when students learned about it and went, hey, no apartheid, no investment, and really started pushing, as did the university professors, because they were their pension funds. But recently in Florida, the governor had also pushed through measures that basically said, no, we're not going to do any of that social investing. We're not going to have any morals behind our investments in the state of Florida's pension fund. No, which made it harder for people to push to divest for ethical reasons, like Russia So I've got some homework to do to find out what their current status is and knocking on some doors. And I'm guessing there may be some other people in other states that may want to ask their states or ask their media to ask their states the same type of questions. Not so much from the financial risk perspective, but from the moral perspective. Just one of those things that we haven't really discussed in the space recently. It's probably been about 18 months since I've heard that particular part of the topic brought up. So I definitely have some more homework to do, but I'm thinking that other people in other states may also as well. Just tossing it out there. I like being a rabble rouser.
You don't like to cause problems, do you, Nancy?
Oh, only the most complex, messiest kinds, those are the fun ones.
You sound like Will. Go ahead, IT fella.
Yeah, I agree with you on the morality of it, but Wall Street and its pension fund managers, what they do has nothing to do with morals. It's all data to them, but they have very good risk assessment. They have
Yeah, and I was very surprised. I was skimming through the last 2 quarters of the state's documentation, and I was surprised not to see any notations about country risk and Russia or things like that at all in any of their state level presentations. That was quite surprising to me.
I would say that's probably true with basically any kind of pension fund, business pension, any kind of pension fund or mutual funds. Hopefully their risk management has been paying attention to what's going on and rolling back on their Russian investments. And I suspect they have.
So, Will?
I'll let you know what I find out in Florida.
And you know she will, because that's what Nancy does. So, Will, were you in mourning because of the name of the termit?
Well, I just think it's the missed marketing opportunity of the year easily.
Yeah, it's interesting. I came across a tweet the other day about a family of immigrants from Sloviansk that has created more than 60 evacuation electronic stretchers. And the devices are assembled by the entire family at their own expense, saying that such devices should be in every company. Even their children, Alicia and Yesenia, are included in the process. And the stretchers are compact, easy to make, and more affordable than the Western counterparts. And they look very close. They look very similar to the Combat Wombat, as I know you affectionately called it. But I'm not able to find a whole lot of additional information about this. But it's I wonder if it is related to that. If perhaps what I'm seeing is old, and these guys are, because all I'm seeing is I would assume Ukrainian language video. But I think it's no, actually, it can't be the same because this is wheels, not tracks, and so that is awesome.
And for your listeners, the Prince is talking about the name for the little land-based robot track item that fits perfectly inside an M113. They drop the back, and this little robot drone goes out and can carry 300 kilograms. It's a utility thing. It's very low slung. It doesn't carry weapons, but it's very, very useful in carrying 300 kilograms of stuff on the battlefield. Can cruise up to 9 kilometers an hour. And when it rolls out the back, they call it the termit, which means termite, which I think is a massive marketing opportunity lost of the year, because have a look at that thing and tell me it's not the Combat Wombat. Should be called the Combat Wombat. It should. Nobody ever listens to me, Nancy.
Aw, what did you say?
That perhaps may be why he's looking for ex-wife number 3. So yeah, that could have something to do with it.
Isn't that future ex-wife number 3, I think?
Oh yeah.
I
Yeah.
always mix up the designations. Okay.
Yeah, you know, Prince doesn't worry about getting details like that, right?
No, there's no reason to get details like that right. Future, present, past, whatever. Anybody would like a house, Will is willing to provide. Yeah, I'm going to take a really big sharp turn here, Nancy. There was an
All
article.
right, I'm ready for whiplash.
You're ready for whiplash. Oh crap, I forgot about that. There was an article in the New York Times a few days ago about Ukraine rebuilding its identity. The folk songs that are the new cool. So it took me back actually to prior conversations that I've had regarding the recording of folk songs by the elderly population in Ukraine in very, very small villages spread hither and yon around Ukraine. And I'm trying to go and find that article right now real quick because I can never remember the name of it. And before I go and find that, before I find that, as I'm already scrolling through my bookmarks, TKD Bach is probably already sent me the name of the group. And these are old articles. No, here it is. Polyphony, the Polyphony Project. And back in 2019, the Kyiv Post and Euromaidan both had pieces about them. And I just think it's very, very interesting stuff. They have gone around and they have over 5 years across country travels of 2000. They've gone and gotten 2,000 unique Ukrainian songs and dozens of sold out concerts in European cities. So they have these. They've created this the largest online archive of traditional Ukrainian songs. And the project, of course, is not just about singing nice songs or recording folk melodies. It's about supporting the ancient traditions and the ideas that it is passing them on to the future generations. It's about preserving our heritage today because tomorrow may be too late. Songs and chants live only when they are transmitted by living voices. Persons that know them pass them on. We are not eternal, therefore we must act now and record as many songs as possible to be able to pass on to our kids. So it is just a very, very interesting, project. And, you know, when I first found it, I was just mesmerized by these old women, women and men at times, but old women mostly, singing these songs together a cappella in their very, very tight harmony. And so then when I saw this article recently that I thought I opened and perhaps I didn't. Perhaps I didn't. When I saw this article recently about about Ukrainian folk songs being the new cool, I thought that was really, really interesting. And then, of course, with the connection today of it. Oh, come on! What did I do with it? The connection today of having on the artists who are going around the United States and performing in that same group that's going into the trenches and performing. I thought it was all very, very cool and very, very sort of, oh, I don't know. It all works together. It all works together to be doing the same kind of thing, but while at the same time doing very different kinds of things, um, spreading this information around. And damned if I can't find where I put that now again. I had just opened it. There it is. Ay, ay, ay.
Oh, good, you found it.
I did. I did because I'm a dork and it was already open. Um, but I have to tell you, I really enjoyed these guys today. They were a lot of that. They were very, very good. Oh, that's why I got frustrated. Ay, 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 I tell you. And I see Pickled Flicker Fellas coming up. So let me again, because I screwed that up. There we go. So the Polyphony Project is taking these from the elder generation and recording them, and now the younger generation is picking up on them and are doing things with them. Now, mind you, these original articles that I found about the Polyphony Project were back from 2019. And so there is actually on YouTube a decent digest and a decent group of these videos with these songs with these women and men singing all of these different folk songs from different very small villages all around Ukraine. But now to be able to see that they are not they're making their way into the mainstream music scene in Ukraine, and Ukrainian folk singers are filling the room, filling rooms with their high pitched voices and the polyphonic choruses, accompanied by a DJ spinning techno beats, all to a cheering crowd. So these days, the Ukrainian folk music is becoming something cool. As one of the singers from a band on stage said that night, it's a very, very cool thing. More than 2 years, of course, into Russia's full scale invasion of Ukraine, folk music is enjoying a surge of popularity in the war torn nation, which, of course, is faced with trying to demolish, with having its culture demolished by the Moscow regime, by the Russian invasion and the Russian genocide on Ukraine. People have embraced their traditional songs in a way to reconnect to their past and affirm their identity. So it's with this defensive measure that Viktor Perfetsky, who started the traditional singing classes after the war broke out. If we don't know who we are, Russians will come and force us to be who they want us to be. And so that's part of the whole idea, is to be able to pass these things on. The stark change of attitude in Ukraine, where folk songs had been dismissed as archaic relics of peasant culture. Today, those same songs are being played in open air festivals and in trendy bars. Classes in white voice singing, a traditional Ukrainian vocal style akin to controlled yelling, are selling out. And youngsters practice traditional dances in the streets of Kyiv with cans of beer in their hands. So the bands are building on this trend to bring folk songs into the 21st century. They've collaborated with DJs and jazz bands to give the music a modern twist, adding electronic overtones and guitar melodies. Their ultimate goal: to reshape Ukraine's identity around its rich but long ignored past. It shouldn't be a passing trend, he says. Um, it should be a part of everyday life. And I think that's really, really kind of cool. But seeing these traditions of the music and the dance and all of these things starting to be brought forward more, is just a really cool thing. And I think actually it sort of intersects with what we talked about today with your guests. Is it Soldiers of Song for the movie? And their message
Yep.
with that movie, with that documentary of taking that music to the trenches, to the guys on the front line, but also now bringing it to the United States to help to share that with people so people are more aware of Ukraine and Ukrainian culture. Pickled Flicker fella, as a Ukrainian, I think perhaps you may have something to say here. Go ahead.
Yeah, I kind of got the foot in each camp of this whole thing, right? Being originally from Ukraine and living in the United States. Really appreciate you guys' conversation. It is very interesting. And I actually wanted to come up early when you guys were talking about like different companies and some of the finances stuff. I don't want to go back to that subject, but I did do a finance analysis in one of the U.S. based trading companies, IQVIA, I believe. It's a holding company, and I was actually surprised. The reason I picked it because it still does business in Russia, right? But I was actually surprised to learn that they actually continue to increase profits. But anyway, this just to kind of give a quick heads up, and this is something that I think we need to address at a greater scale. But anyway, that's a previous topic. This one is a lot more interesting. I think what you guys talking about as far as the Ukrainian culture, music, and you know what? I've also observed this incredible uptick in interest in modernizing Ukrainian folk music, right? Because if you look at 2021 Eurovision, the Ukrainian song that ended up getting the first place was called Stefania. That was very much based on, the performance of it, right? It's based in the Ukrainian style folk music. And what I think modern artists in Ukraine do is they take those elements and they combine it with modern trends, modern music, and they come up with this new, unique, culturally rich, new product essentially, right? And that really speaks not only to like some of the historical elements of Ukrainian culture and its development, but also to modern uptick in feeling of patriotism and national identity that Ukrainians definitely have demonstrated in while they face this genocidal war the Russians waging on them. And I thought it was really interesting. There's let me see. Do you guys remember who performed that particular? It was Kulish Orchestra who did the Stefania song for
Yeah.
Eurovision, right? There was another, I think it was this year or maybe a lot previous year, 2023 Eurovision. I think they also placed it wasn't the first place, but they got pretty close, maybe third. Team of Ukrainian singers. I think it was Alona and something Hell. Let me see. Jerry Hale. They also had a song they were performing, Teresa and Maria. It has a very similar vibe to it that you can definitely pick up a Ukrainian folk culture in lyrics and how it's basically put together essentially. So yeah, I definitely can see that. And the interesting aspect of it, right? A lot of that Ukrainian folk singing is really kind of integrated into like modern almost rap music, right? Like hip hop, that kind of stuff, which I guess is designed to appeal to younger population, but it definitely makes it a lot more modern and more appealing to listen to and just generally jam out to. I've been a huge like I've noticed myself kind of bringing back a lot of the Ukrainian modern music back into my life, and I really enjoy it too. And especially the more patriotic stuff, right? But yeah, I thought it was really cool. If you guys want, I can definitely share some of the videos with you of that latest Eurovision song about Alona. So
That Eurovision song was really good, and I think that the Eurovision song is talks so strongly about women too. That but I think that's interesting. And the way they wrote that song is they sat and talked, I guess, for hours and hours and hours. Um, Alona and what's her name? Jerry Hall and Alana, I guess. They sat and they talked for hours and hours and hours, and then they went into separate rooms and they freaking wrote it. And then they came back and it just worked. And I think it's because they've known each other for so long. But the fact I think that they included some of these themes from Ukrainian folk music into that process, into the music, speaks to how the identity of the Ukrainian folk music is coming back into view and is coming back into the culture in a big way. And I just think it's really an interesting thing. I put into the nest, first thing in the nest right now is Ilya Mendel's um, tweet from a few days ago, which is the article that from New York Times from a few days ago that I was reading from a little bit earlier, to talk about how they're rebuilding and sort of taking their identity back around their folk music. And then the second tweet in the nest is the 2019 article from Euromaidan Press about the Polyphony Project, which is I when I found that, I was just absolutely fascinated. And um it's actually started by a Hungarian musician. The Polyphony Project was actually started by a Hungarian musician, and of course the EU. I think that is very interesting. The fact that it's a Hungarian who's after this idea. So anyway, I don't know if anybody has any additional thoughts about these two things, because they are rather interesting to me, at least. But it was one thing. We lost the speaker. I can't remember his name. The Ukrainian gentleman, not Ryan, the other guy.
Kolya is his call sign.
Kolya. We had lost Kolya, and he didn't come. He didn't come back up. But I was going to try to ask him a question targeted around this, if he had come back up. But it's very very cool and very very interesting with the folk songs, and like I said, I don't know if it's because of how I was raised, because I still actually I have found, um, it's kind of crazy. I have found some churches in the former Yugoslavia, well, and actually here in the United States also, and in Hungary, of the church that I grew up in. And so we all use the same hymnal, no matter the language. And I will sit and just listen to I will just sit and listen to them singing hymns, during their services on YouTube when I have the opportunity to and when I can. And what the listening to it in Serbian or in Hungarian, the way it is sung, and there's just something about it that reminds me of the Hungarian folk songs. And I'm sure that is connected to the fact that everything from the United States was imported from the old country, and and so that is sort of what I um, heard in the church I grew up in. And you still hear that in the church that I grew up in, depending on where. In the Serbian churches, you definitely hear that still. In the Hungarian churches, you definitely hear that still, where they sing in Hungarian or they sing in Serbian, and so that always is somehow, even though I don't understand a word of it, I know the tune because they're the same tunes. And so I know what the song is. I can actually sing a lot of these songs, sing along with these songs without a book nearby in English. But being able to have that connection, it just there's something in my brain and my heart that connects to that. And listening to these old women, or these women from these small villages sing these folk songs just really connect with me. And I don't listen to a lot of modern music anymore, but I really, really liked Maria and Teresa that that they did at Eurovision this year. So I wonder if some of it had to do with the folk song bits of it, because there were some definite folk song type bits in that. Anything, Nancy?
Yeah, I think it was interesting when, when you were describing that white voice singing, and you and Pickled Flickafeller were talking, the first song that I had thought of was Stefania as well. And recalling the Azovstal soldier singing that, again, no musical accompaniment or anything else, but, when they were, underground in Azovstal steelworks is when Dmitro Kozatsky, Orist, had sung that. And it was just as hauntingly beautiful then as what we heard from Kalush, potentially even more so. But I appreciated Pickled Flickafella you mentioning that song in particular, because that was the one that jumped immediately to mind for me. And I've got to say, the more Ukrainian music I hear, particularly the classical music and the folk music, the more I hear, the more I appreciate it and enjoy it even more. So I'm definitely anxious to hear more. I've spent probably the last year, outside of the genocide track and understanding that, the more of my spare time has been spent on the literature and the poetry, mostly the poetry. But then again, a lot of the best poems turn into songs or vice versa. And I still remember talking in the space at one point about, oh, and I'm going to draw a blank on his name, Serhej Zhadan, who has got some fantastic Ukrainian poetry books. And somebody coming up to speaker, I forget who it was, and saying, you got to hear his rock band, because that's how closely knit the two are. Music and poetry are very tightly knit together. Go ahead, Pickled.
Yeah, so I'm definitely, going to sound very biased on this, right? But having grew up with Ukrainian language and also Russian language by extension, and kind of seeing, I've seen a little bit of the world, right? I lived in Germany for a little bit, now in the United States. I gotta say, right, Ukrainian language by itself, to me, again, maybe because that's where I was born, right? But it feels so much more presenting a lot more depth, right? This emotional depth. And I gotta say, I feel so thrilled when people tell me that they're learning Ukrainian language, because I think they're in an incredible treat, right? It's not just a language for communicating, right? It's really language for expressing. It does sound beautiful if you listen to it, right? And maybe you don't understand what it says, right, or whatever. But if understand the the meaning of words, the cultural connotation of some of the expressions, right? And generally how precise it is in expressing emotional state, feelings, right? That more of a spiritual kind of, side of the human, I guess, right? It really helps individuals to connect on a new level, right? I could never achieve the same passion of listening, just listening, right? Or even speaking Ukrainian language, with any other language but Ukrainian. And when we're talking about music, art, that kind of stuff, that I mean, it's such a treat, I think, for anybody to really be able to connect with that particular language. Even if it's something that's learned, I think. But I think anyone who speaks more than one language, and Ukrainian is one of the language, it can definitely appreciate the beauty of it on a whole new level. So, I always get excited when people tell me they're learning Ukrainian, trying to learn Ukrainian or whatever it is, because I know that they're going through some really awesome personal experiences, especially if it's somebody from the United States or non-Slavic kind of languages. So anyway, just wanted to share that because yeah, that's I feel very strongly about this. So anyway, thanks for the opportunity to be on the speaker panel and talk.
Oh, absolutely. And I agree with you. While I have not had the bandwidth to focus on learning Ukrainian yet, and I still will, fumble over the pronunciations, but the one thing I've been thinking recently is that when I've learned a little bit of other foreign languages, one of the things that has personally helped me bridge and actually to get my my tongue around the more unique pronunciations and things like that, is music, and singing along in that native tongue. And I think it helps build a rhythm and lets you practice vocally in ways that just straightforward speaking in a language doesn't. So I've been in the back of my mind recently, I've had that I need to start listening to Ukrainian songs more, where I have an opportunity to have both the Ukrainian lyrics and the English language translation in front of me, just so that I, can see it and visualize it and hear it all in the same place, form, and function, as it were. Just because I think that may help me. Um, just because that's how I picked up, some of the uniqueness about Portuguese pronunciation, for example, years ago. Don't ask me to speak it now, but it's the same kind of thing. There are just certain parts of the language that are pronounced a certain way, and if you hear it in song, it just seems, for me anyway, that it sticks better. I remember it better, and I can form the word in my mouth better after I've heard the language more in song. But I have to be able to digest it closely. I can't just hear it in the background and go, "Oh yeah, I got that," It's got to be that up close and personal. You guys definitely don't want to hear me singing anymore. Used to be okay, but not in decades. But I could still practice sing in the shower and accomplish my goal, I think. And Ukrainian is such a melodic language when you're not stumbling over pronunciation anyway. Back to you, Pickled and Heather.
Oh no, I stumble over pronunciation, and I think I pronounced something just absolutely perfectly fine, and Duolingo is looking at me like, "When are you going to say it right?" Yeah, Duolingo. Duolingo has a different expectation than my ability, and that at times that's sometimes a little demoralizing. But I work it out,
Oh, my
and
problem, what I
that's
hate
okay.
is when I hear the name and I practice it multiple times, hear it, practice it, and then the person is, on the space with me and I completely butcher it because I just am like, "Oh my gosh, I'm talking to you now. Crap, I can't get a word out." But oh well.
Yes, yes, yes. And no, I actually get that too. Yeah, because I had a little bit of that kind of oh my god kind. We've all had that little bit of oh my god, am I really talking to you moments on Maria Report. I mean, who are some of the people that are like, oh my god, are you really, am I really talking to you? And then of course there was the whole months long process of learning how to say Ukrsaloznitsia. And that literally was a months long process. We all struggled with that one. I think it was just Little parties were thrown in houses all around the world when people learned how to say Ukrasalesnitsia.
Now you're just showing off. Yeah, I think the and I remembered too that the R sound in that word is difficult for many English speakers, who speak only English, because it's a rolled R, but it's not a long rolled R either. I'm going to tend to over trill my R when I say it, and I catch myself doing that because it's like, okay, that would be the Spanish pronunciation of Ukrainian. Go ahead, Pickled.
That is funny. So I'll take your Ukrzaliznica and I will raise you an English equivalent for me of that. Do you want to know what it is?
Sure, what is it?
Tragedy. It's so difficult for me to
Interesting.
pronounce this. It's so difficult for me to pronounce this word because sometimes I have to, I have to do kind of like mental, search for certain words, terms, vocabularies, and things like that, right? And that word does not come naturally. And when I say it mentally inside my head to myself, I butcher it even more, right? And then a lot of times, especially when I'm tired and I have to say this word out loud, oh my god, I just start stuttering, all kinds of stuff, sweating, all kinds of stuff starts happening because that's not the one word that you typically use in a sentence that you really want to mess up, right? Because typically conversation requires a serious response as well, right? And yeah, that one is really difficult for me. It's very similar to your Ukrzaliznica. So I just wanted to share that.
It's words like that, I think, in every language. I'm sitting here talking to a muted mic. So yeah. So Nancy, we got about 15, 20 more minutes left in our segment here. Was there anything specific that you had lined up that you wanted to talk about before we finished up?
Here's the sad thing. I think I had something, but it wasn't so pressing that I can locate it now. So if you've got something that you wanted to talk about, that'd be great. Otherwise, I am going to see if I can get back to my bookmarks and find that puppy because I am just drawing a blank. I'm not used to being in the co-host seat as long as you are. So, yeah,
Well,
I'm a softie. My brain's mush already. Isn't that embarrassing?
no, it's not embarrassing. And I was busy today and I didn't have as much time to prepare as I like to usually. So I know that's really sad, but I'm flipping through sources as I go around, and this one caught my attention, and I thought it was pretty cool. I did not realize Ukrainian Railways, speaking of Ukrzaliznytsia, has produced 70 medical railway cars since the start of the war. Now, this is important and this is good because when they produce these, they have things that are needed in a medical situation that regular railway cars don't. You would think that. No, I don't know. I don't think I would think that. I guess that you can't make a medical car out of nothing. So they have produced 70 medical railway cars at their own facilities since the beginning of the full scale invasion. They say their press service announced. On June 12th, the Ukrainian railways added 2 more medical evacuation cars to its rolling stock for the needs for the armed forces of Ukraine. These cars are outfitted to transport soldiers who suffered wounds moderate severity alongside essential medical equipment and kits. They feature power generation, water purification systems. The press service added that the railway workers, in addition to doctors, serve on board medical trains. They ensure the stable operation of the medical cars, systems, and module generators, and lifts. In May, Ukrzaliznytsia passed the armed forces 2 upgraded rail cars for the evacuation of wounded soldiers. So this is absolutely fabulous. Go ahead, pickled flicker fella.
Yeah, Prince, I don't want to distract from the story because it is a fascinating story. I just wanted to raise my hand because I do need to drop down. And before I go, I just wanted to say thank you, Prince, and thank you, Nancy, for today's really interesting, discussions. And Nancy, thank you for sending that invitation and letting me know about the special guest. It was really interesting listening to Mikolai. Unfortunately, it wasn't very long because he did have to drop out, but drop down, I guess. He had connectivity issues, but I did DM him and I want to kind of engage with him a little bit more. I am interested in some of the work that he does. So I really appreciate this space altogether. As you guys know, I always say, you guys do a very important job, and you're keeping me motivated on a daily basis. So thank you for everything you guys do. I'm gonna drop down. I wish you best of luck. I think you guys getting ready to rotate out as well. But yeah, have a good day, good morning, good evening, and Slava Ukraini.
Herom Slava.
Slava.
Thank you so much, pickled flicka Yeah, I definitely want to have our guests come back again. I know that we did have a few people, like I said, who weren't able to be on tonight, who I know definitely wanted to be. So and to hear Mikolaj's passion of what he's doing and the mission and what they're doing, both as cultural exchange here and then cultural exchange back in Ukraine, as well as the work they do with the soldiers, and the whys and hows of that is just absolutely fascinating to me. So yeah, I could have gone on for hours, but I also know they had a couple of appointments, and I could tell a couple of times, even with Ryan, that in their hotel, it's like, okay, if you stand just perfectly, your audio is going to be great. Otherwise, it's going to get flaky. So we'll get them in a different setup next time as well too. And but we will definitely work on having them back again soon. So thank you.
Yep, that's great. And I am gonna go back to the trains, because what it brought to mind, for me was in the first days of the full scale invasion. I don't know if Ukraine didn't have enough of these or just um, didn't have any. But in the first days of the full scale invasion, one of the things I remember very distinctly, of course, is evacuations. We all remember evacuations. But what I remember from some of the evacuations were the evacuation of extremely ill children, children with cancer, children who were severely handicapped who needed specialized care. And these children were being evacuated from either one part of Ukraine to another part of Ukraine, for treatment, or so their treatment could continue, or they were being evacuated out of the country so that their treatment could continue. And what I remember from watching those, uh, what I remember from that is kids basically laying on mattresses on the floor, and their mothers or their loved ones or their nurses sitting next to them on the floor and treating them, and cuddling them or whatever. Um, and and so basically, what Ukraine did at that point was they did the best they could. They did what they could in order to make sure that these people could get out of the country and get out and get to a safer area so that they could be treated, or that they could receive treatment, or they could continue treatment. Um, and so I think back to that time, and I'm sure towards the beginning of the full scale invasion that Ukraine did the same kind of thing with wounded soldiers, because with the environment in Ukraine, you can't take the helicopters in for evacuation. You can't, there's so many things that you can't do to evacuate. Um, and buses aren't as I don't think buses are as comfortable as a train. Definitely more bumpy in my recollection. Um, and so and not as fast. and I think it more risk. Um, so definitely the train is a good option for being able to do that. Um, so I'm really glad to see that they have produced these 70 additional medical railway cars. It just looks like a narrow hospital ward, where they can care for people as they need while they are traveling, and so that makes it better so that they can move these guys from one part of Ukraine to another part of Ukraine to be treated and to continue their treatment. So
Yeah.
I just thought that was interesting piece that I just found. Go
Yeah,
ahead,
and that's
Nancy.
awesome that they have so many of them now, because I was going back and, and quickly found a few of the articles from 2022. And because I remembered Alexander Commission when he was here speaking with us, that the um, the medical cars and the medical trains were a creation, basically, that they coordinated with um, Doctors Without Borders at the time, because nobody had anything like that for that specific need at that point in time. Well, it's certainly not one that would run on their existing rail gauge. And so they worked together with um, Doctors Without Borders, or MSF, for, I think back then it was weekly medical evacuations by rail. And, having more capability for not just the children and elderly to be evacuated, but to your point, to be able to um, take care of wounded and, severely injured soldiers or civilians that need to go somewhere for more specialized surgery. It just makes sense, and I'm glad to see that they've grown it. um, I mean, it's sad that they have had to grow it to that level, but I'm glad to see that they established a pattern and a function and an approach that works for them, and I'm sure has gotten more sophisticated. I know if you go back and look at the like the summer of 2022 and articles then, a lot of those, they were working on them as they went. How can we convert an existing simple rail car, simple passenger car, into something that can allow for effectively an ICU type transport. And it's just amazing to see how far they've come, and the advances and inventions that they've made through necessity, are just amazing. And I know that they won't be the last time those inventions are used for other purposes as well. And yeah, they've come a long way over the last few years in that. And I've actually found, just in fact, the National Institute of Health in the United States has, research documents on those trains and what they did. What can we learn from that? How can that be replicated elsewhere? How effective was it? And it's pretty amazing to see that. And this National Institute of Health, National Library of Medicine article that I just found and was skimming, says that there really hasn't been this volume of medical evacuations out of a country. It says the last large-scale wartime medical evacuation by train took place during the Korean War conflict of 1950 to 1953. But there have been recent train transports of patients with COVID-19 to ICUs. They did that in France as well. So that's another indicator to me that these that what Ukraine basically reinvented, since it hadn't been around since Korea, is something that is going to have useful purpose in other scenarios as well. So I'll send you a link to this article I just found. I think it'll be a good one for us to follow up on as well. Probably something to talk about with Dave on Sunday. Preparing content.
Always good to have something to talk to Dave about on Sundays. That's always much appreciated. And so, yeah, I see that one of our negligent musicians has arrived. I mean, how dare a workday get in the way of a really good Maria Report segment?
I know, right?
I know. I think it's extremely rude. I am so just joking around. So yeah. Anyway, I think that Adam would have really enjoyed that segment today. And if you haven't sent him the video from Kalamazoo, you should. You'll love it.
Yeah, I need to do that, and especially I've actually been meaning to pull a follow-up thread together, and so I'll make sure to put it in that. It's probably going to be tomorrow before I'm able to do that, but I'll make certain to share that thread when I do, because I know that that Ryan Smith also put some really good information into the nest, or not into the nest. I'm sorry, into the purple pill. So I want to pull some of that together and see what he was able to add, and see what else I've got that I can supplement. And this this poor little church in Kalamazoo, it was just one guy's post that I saw, but it was from just a couple of days ago, that the church had cultural forces in concert there. And so they're going to be wondering, wow, how did we get so many views? And it's like, oh, that's the power of Maria Report. Mwahaha.
That is the power of social media. And yeah, they very well may go, oh boy, what did we do here? That is an interesting thought, because you never know. So, and Brian, I keep trying to bring you up,
Yeah,
and
same here.
you keep falling back down, bud.
Well, if it's
So
okay, Prince.
ah,
Yes, we got him.
third time's a
Yeah,
charm.
I was going to say maybe I need to step down and have us put Adam in place and see what we have to do to properly get Brian up. But it looks like we've got that now.
It does. It looks like it. It does look like it. So it has been a pleasure, Nancy. It's we managed to co-host together for 3 hours and not talk about genocide the entire time. I'm sort of proud of us.
Yeah, who knew that we had other subjects we could talk about, huh? What the heck?
I didn't realize it. I really didn't realize it.
And we could have gone
So
longer. I didn't break out the poetry books, but I'll do that for next time.
well, there's always poetry. Poetry never goes stale. There may be a poem about that. I don't know. So, anyway, good evening, Brian. Good evening, Adam. How are you?
I am better than I deserve. How are you, Prince?
You say you're always better than you deserve, so that's not a bad thing.
That's always a good thing.
Well, Prince, if it's okay, guys, I'm going to drop down and let one of our co-hosts up so that we can get settled in and get the next group rolling. Prince Heather, I really appreciate you hopping up and joining me, so that when my brain turned to mush, we still had somebody else able to talk coherently. That's always a good thing. And I appreciate everyone for joining this afternoon and this evening. And Slava Ukraini.
Hiram Slava. And it's only 10 p.m. your time. Your brain doesn't turn to mush for 2 more hours. I know this from
I wish.
co-hosting with you on. I know this from co-hosting Understanding Genocide with you for months. But that's okay. So Adam, how are you tonight?
Oh, I'm all right. Um, I've got co-host invite coming in, so flying up the chair. Yeah, work is just crazy right now. That's all I can say. Otherwise, I'd be around more, but it's just been mental.
It's all good. I get it. I am going to eject from the seat here, and I need to go spend some time with my birds because bedtime for them is in 55 minutes, and they get very confused if bedtime is late. So I will catch you all later. 3 more hours, I'll be right back. So have a good one, enjoy, and I'll talk to you all later. Slava Ukraini.
Hiram Slava.
Well, folks, welcome to MriyaReport. Please retweet the space. Me and Brian always seem to attract some real characters while we're on, and so every time a troll accosts us, you can donate some money if you like it. How we deal with them. Sometimes Brian is just like cool like lemonade. He's really good, and then I'm the opposite, and I have to turn off my mic to hyperventilate between rants sometimes. But you know, I'm working on it. How's it going, Brian?
I'm just as cool as the other side of the pillow. Shout out to the late Stuart Scott on that one. Yeah, so yeah, I am doing well. I'm doing well. Yeah, it is kind of a little bit of a blood sport to let some trolls in here and just dismantle them limb by limb with argumentation. Yeah, I think we should sell tickets to that, or maybe the ticket for admission is for people to donate to our fundraiser. So for the cost of a donation for demining equipment, you too can watch our co-host here dismantle Russian trolls for your pleasure. And I see we have an early hand. Hello, Karen. Good evening.
Hi. I can't see my hand, but I'm glad you. Oh, now I can see it. Oh, I was wondering what with the G7 coming up, if you heard anything about where it's being held. The reason I am asking, I just read this article in CNN, and I'll send it to you. It said the mafia-style violence is on the rise in the Italian region where the G7 leaders are supposed to meet. And it gave the name of the resort, and it talked about an increase of gangs knocking off each other's foes and brazen daylight attacks and carjackings. And all I can say is I hope they're putting on extra security because this sounds like a really violent area. It's an offshoot. The group they're worried about is an offshoot of the Sacra Corona criminal syndicate centered around the town of Bogia. And anyway, there have been kneecappings and maimings and murders, and a briefcase was found at a train station nearby with bottles of liquid and a cell phone, and there are almost daily bomb threats. And I hope that CNN was exaggerating because I don't want this to be true. I want everybody to be safe. And I just wondered, what you guys thought of that. Thank you.
I think if they want some good home cooking, they should probably have the summit in Alaska, Karen. But yeah, sometimes those are exaggeration. It sounds like one of those stories that's a little bit slow news day, and they wanted to say something about the G7 and connect it to something, and they didn't have much, because that stuff is going to be on lockdown if you replace the word stuff with a swear word for poop. I think yeah, the last thing any crime boss is going to want is to, step from the underworld into the political world with an international assassination. But that's just me. What do you say, Dan?
Yeah, Karen, I just wanted to mention what you just described there sounds kind of like Russia.
Well, you know something, the Russian mafia has ties with the Kremlin, and the Russian mafia also has ties with the Italian mafia. And I don't want to start any conspiracy theories, but I just hope that CNN was exaggerating, because I want everybody to be safe. And it sounds like a dangerous area, and I wish they hadn't chosen that area. I really wish they'd put it somewhere in Germany. Germany tends to be a little safer. They should have had it in Berlin, not in anywhere in Italy. But I guess it's too late now. Anyway, I'll send you the article.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of factors that go into selecting these venues. Some of that is probably horse trading between the different countries, and rotating, and favors being done for folks and stuff. But yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, but I'm thank you for bringing that up. Definitely look at your tweet there for sure. Um, I kind of made reference in passing to this demining fundraiser that we're doing. So, for those of you who are new or newer to MriyaReport, one of the things that we do is fundraise for worthy causes related to the Ukrainian war here. And so, the last fundraiser we did was for solar power generators for healthcare facilities that are in the Kharkiv region, since they have been for some time under tremendous pressure in terms of regular attacks from across the border by Russia, targeting civilian infrastructure and civilian buildings, and so these solar generators that we fundraised for were purchased and are now in operation in service in Ukraine at hospitals and mobile healthcare medical brigade, and there is a newer fundraiser that we have launched. It is to raise funds for demining equipment, such as multi-tool equipment and hearing protection. Hearing protection is part of the job when you're looking at demining, because you're dealing with obviously a lot of explosives as you're detonating ordnance that mines that you found that you're trying to safe and get rid of. And so the fundraising that we're doing is to purchase demining equipment to support this effort. Unfortunately, if we talk to people who have some expertise in this area, you're talking a decade to potentially multiple decades of time that it will take to fully demine Ukraine. Because of first of all of the mines that the Russians laid, but of course also as part of a defensive strategy, the Ukrainians are also selectively laying mines to disable tanks and other vehicles, because they are the ones being invaded and trying to avoid being killed and being eliminated and wiped off the face of the earth. So this is actively underway here. And so this fundraiser, so if you could, it is the last tweet in the nest. If you scroll all the way to the left, you'll see that last tweet there. So if you could, please consider donating, and no amount is too small to donate for that fundraiser. If you are not able to donate at the moment, if nothing else, if you could just take that tweet and retweet it to your followers, that would be very appreciated. I have just been amazed by the commitment that our listeners, Adam, have have our participants here, how they've got behind these fundraisers, for over an extended period of time, and it's not something we take for granted, and it's very much appreciated. What do you think, Adam?
Yeah, and it's also a tax write-off for our American friends. So we're a 501c3, which means all of these organizations and groups that we fundraise for are vetted by our organization, because they have to be, because we're vetted by various IRS functionaries, I'm sure. So it's all above board, and so you can safely donate and get a tax receipt, which is a bonus to your good deed.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, so we appreciate you guys being here. Also, you could be anywhere right now, but you're with us, so we really appreciate you pulling up and talking with us. Adam and I have a list of topics that I'm sure we want to discuss, but it always is a lot more fun also if we have people come up and talk to us. People come and ask questions or make a comment, express your opinions. We absolutely welcome that. So definitely want to encourage everyone to please request a mic if you've not done that before. If this is your first time wanting to speak in a space, or your first time in a space at all, there's a little microphone on the lower left. You just hit that and request a mic, and then we bring you up as a speaker, and then you raise your hand. There's a little heart sign on the lower part of your phone, and you can press that, and you'll see a little hand signal. You can raise your hand, and we'll get to you. So definitely, one of the things I love about this space is that it's, we try to, keep some decorum, and we don't typically have, you go into some of these spaces and it's like, it's a disaster, right? I mean, it's a shout show. You feel like you're watching, some of these sports shows where they yell at each other. And it's really more of a performance than it is an actual dialogue, right? So, we tend to be a little highbrow here. Unfortunately, they let miscreants like me every once in a while come in and co-host. So, they have to class up the joint by having people like Al and Adam here to kind of counterbalance me. No, I'm kidding. So, so that's kind of where we're.
Well, you should have said Alan. When you first said Alan, that would have made more sense.
Yeah, where is Alan? He's not here to. He's already gone good night Gracie probably tonight. So he's not here for us to torture him. So that's okay. We'll get him another night.
That torture when you call a guy a classy gent.
Yeah, I'm co-hosting tomorrow night too, same shift. So I'm doing that with Will. So so it'll be good to see the homie from Workers Paradise Down Under come in here tomorrow night. So what was on your list? I know you had a few items on your list, Adam. I had a few items as well. What did you want to kick off tonight with to discuss?
Well, I wanted to talk about this Polish foreign minister claim about that the Kremlin may store up to 100 nuclear warheads in Königsberg or Kaliningrad Oblast. I thought that was a pretty strange revelation to come out of a scary revelation, I should say. Did you hear about that one?
No, I hadn't heard that. So, is there a tweet that you found that we could put in the nest and kind of examine this as a space, or what? I'm just looking.
Well, I always forget to make my tweets ahead of time, and I'm terribly slow. But if you go to that document I send you, if you want to do a tweet, and I will. go ahead and do the article.
Yeah, that sounds good. Okay, yeah, here we go. I see it. All right, I'm going to the site now. And then I'm going to go to Twitter.
My internet decided to give out at the precise moment, folks. That's just lovely.
Yeah, and
And the rain started at the same time.
I'm having trouble also trying to get, it's like glacially slow. I don't know what the.
Well, this is it, folks. The attack. They finally
Okay,
come.
here we go. All right.
Red Rising.
So
time.
Kiev Independent. Yeah, all right. So then now I have that on my timeline. So, ladies and gentlemen, I have that on my timeline now. So I am going to then load it up into the nest because Prince Heather isn't here to stop me from polluting the nest with all kinds of messages. So I'm going to do that. Here we go. Yeah, it's in the nest now. Okay, so it's the last tweet in the nest. Let's see. So, Russia might be storing up to 100 nuclear weapons warheads in Kaliningrad Oblast, which is 160 miles from Warsaw, the Polish foreign minister claims during the Ukraine Recovery Conference in Berlin. So, a White House official indicated on June 7th that the United States might need to increase its deployment of strategic nuclear weapons in response to growing threats from China, Russia, and other adversaries. All right, so this is essentially saber rattling, right? How many times have we seen threats from the Russians regarding nukes, right? We've heard that a lot lately. But it is interesting that the Polish foreign minister brought this up during this Ukraine Recovery Conference.
And I just think it speaks to hypocrisy, Brian. They've got this big chip on their shoulder and this whole fake story about NATO and all of it. I think you got a hot mic, sir. And so it's just pathetically hypocritical because here they are, the whole thing was, oh, we don't want NATO nukes in Ukraine and we're going to start a genocidal war because of it. And they don't even, and here they are secretly storing. I don't know if we already knew this. It was a revelation to me that there was that many nukes there. And I remember recently that they moved a bunch to Belarus too. So yeah, lots of saber rattling, as you say, but also hypocritical because they always make that first escalation move. So it's always up to them to throw poop at the wall and see if it sticks.
Yeah, I had fun on a related topic. I had fun with somebody that said, a guy from CNBC. He's like, "Oh, these Russians, there's a ship out near Cuba." It's like, and I made the comment. I replied to him. I'm like, "Yeah, it's judging by." The performance of the Black Sea Fleet and the Russian military in general in Ukraine. He said basically he positioned it as a flex, and then my response to him was that judging from the performance of the Russian Black Sea Fleet against Ukraine and the overall Russian military performance in the war, I'm not sure they are capable of any sort of real flex. So I got a lot of.
Well, I love that. I mean, not a military expert in any way, man, but like when people still talk about, yeah, Russia could just blah, 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 still, and it's like, that 80 or 90% of their actual armed forces are fighting in Ukraine right now. That they've actually depleted the rest of their forces guarding against NATO attack elsewhere. But the facts don't matter with those guys.
Yeah, and I think next time we've got military experts in the audience there. I want to ask them. I mean, how unusual is it that they're now pulling out golf carts, glorified golf carts, and motorcycles, and sending Russian troops? Because I've actually seen drone footage of Russians on motorcycles charging towards the Ukrainian. You may have seen the same clip where they were charging towards the Ukrainian position, and then essentially they just, 1 minute they're riding it, and then the next minute they're like off the motorcycles, on the ground, basically probably full of bullet holes. I just, is that unusual? I mean, would you?
It presents a smaller target than 12 guys on top of the BMP, I guess, but it's yeah, the golf cart ones are the craziest, and you gotta I mean, we hear nothing out of Telegram. I mean, you hear tons of crazy stuff from Telegram accounts by Muscali, but they don't been seen as much about the barrier troops. So how are they getting dudes to leave towards the front on golf carts? Like, do they give them like speed and like some sort of drug cocktail and tell them they're cool, or is it actual barrier troops? Like, what's going on?
Are they trying to channel their inner Steve McQueen and be like from the film The Great Escape? Are they trying to duplicate that vibe? It's like the Sheryl Crow song, like Steve McQueen, right?
Oh yeah, I know. I get the reference. Yeah, except I wouldn't want to put him next to any Muscali ding dongs. But if that's what they're going for and that's the result, then fill your boots, fellas. But it doesn't. Doesn't work. I guess it. I don't know what else to say about it. Just gross negligence on the part of their commanders. In any case.
Maybe I should put some of this video of them on motorcycles in my slide deck to sort of highlight to the congregants, what how far they've fallen, right? I mean, they would probably have a good laugh at it. It's sort of morbid gallows humor that's what they're down to over there.
Yeah, I guess you gotta judge your audience. It would be my first choice in a religious audience, but maybe once you got them hooked and they're like full NAFO fellas by the fourth session, then you can start showing them the actual bonk videos.
They'll be having their own fellas and creating new Twitter. If they weren't on Twitter, they're going to join Twitter, and their class assignment will be to have to show us their fellas when we come to session 2.
Well, I think it's important for you to because a lot of the fatigue and the low information voters who don't necessarily support Ukraine or don't throw their full support behind Ukraine, but they just have in their ear, in their brain, they've heard about corruption, they've heard about those stories that come out that are immediately debunked, like the big uproar when Zelensky banned all those pro-Russian political parties and people, all of this spin against Ukraine's democracy. But the way that NAFO and I would say MriyaReport and other sort of grassroots fundraising and equipment sourcing organizations that are horizontal, like community based, or with no actual, like, I guess, like fundraising leadership. Anyways, it's all like it mirrors Maidan, is what I'm badly trying to say. And And I think it'd be really neat for once you guys get into it, you could spend some time about telling them about what happened in 2014 and explaining to them how it was a leaderless revolution. There was politicians who tried to take control of it and ride the beast, but they didn't let them because they didn't want to make it about one party or one political faction, or left or right or any of that jazz. It was about the people and working together, and that spirit has continued into the war once the fake um, quote unquote separatists with their tanks and helicopters started fighting in the Donbass. um, that spirit continued into the war and through the start of the full scale invasion. And I think we see that spirit mirrored in things like NAFO and things like MriyaReport. And I'm not doing a very good job of explaining it, but I could send you some articles about my time to do a better job. And just to give the people that, the congregants who are listening to you, a sense of the society and the spirit and the community and the grassroots organization that just happens in Ukrainian culture and society. They don't mess around. They just find a way to do it and call every friend they have and find that little drone part and find a dude with a 3D printer, and on it goes. And every Ukrainian I met when I was there was super industrious, and it all really took form in the Maidan. And I think if more low information citizens see more of that, then there'll be more complete support from Ukraine, from the public. I think spread like wildfire from things like what you're doing, Brian.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, for those who are maybe not familiar with what we're talking about, so at my I attend a United Methodist Church in North Carolina, and so I had this idea to do a Ukraine for the Curious educational session series for people who might be interested in the congregation. So my pastor was pretty supportive and allowed me to pitch the idea to the congregation from the pulpit during Sunday worship. And I had, lo and behold, I had 16 people total, 14 from the congregation, and then two others that were neighbors from congregants expressed interest in participating. So that was a good result. Excited about to have that many people. We got our first session on June 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern U.S. So I'm fortunate to have some people who live in the area who have some particular expertise in Ukraine. I have one guy who was the NATO chief of diplomatic mission to Ukraine back in the 90s, and he happens to live in Black Mountain, North Carolina, which is not far from where we live. So he has been gracious enough to, obviously, since he was the guy in NATO in the 90s, he has a lot of historical perspective on Ukraine, and since rotating out of that position, he's obviously having lived in the country for a number of years, kept up with what's happened, and so I'm looking forward to his expertise. And then there's a retired couple, both military veterans, U.S., who have spent time in Ukraine since the start of the full-scale invasion. They've been to Bucha, so they're going to be there participating as well as sort of people with particular experience. And yeah, so I've got a massive PowerPoint deck that I've been putting together. Wow, how many slides am I up to now? I am up to about 76 slides total, but that includes appendix slides where we, slice and dice some of the propaganda talking points from Russia. So each session is going to be about 90 minutes. So, so session one is going to be historical perspective, and then war current status. Section 2 is going to be persecution of Christians, genocide, war crimes. Section 3 is going to be involvement of liberal democracies and what to expect going forward with the war. And then Section 4 is how they can help their fellow humans and advocacy. So that's what we've got lined up there. So I've been kind of populating content, a lot of historical perspective, and then into current status of the war, or kind of the kickoff of the war, what's happened, why did it go the way that it went, and then go through situation, sit rep for each area of operation, and then what's gone wrong for the Russians, and then that kind of stuff. So yeah, you're talking essentially like 40, 45 slides, 2 minutes per slide. So you're just going through and populating this thing with things, and then the religious persecution is really what I tried to really sell hard, to the congregants. Obviously, given the subject matter, this would make sense, because the religious persecution of Christians by Russians is a thing, very much a thing. And so there's unfortunately, a lot of source material out there to leverage. I have some videos that I've found, some testimonials that have been really helpful. One in particular I've inserted into the presentation, and then I talk about the kidnapping of children, and abduction of children. And actually, that was one of my my things that I wanted to talk about tonight, because I saw this report and it made me really angry. And I don't see it in the nest. I haven't heard it talked about today, although I haven't really spent as much time today. I've been traveling throughout the Carolinas today. But this really got me angry about this children thing. So did you see this Financial Times report, Adam?
No, I did not, sir.
So I have just put this into the nest. This is a tweet from Christopher Miller, who works for the Financial Times. He is their point person in Kyiv. And so just going to summarize this here. So, because there's actually a thread that he talked about here. So apparently they did an investigation of Financial Times. So our Financial Times team identified and located 4 Ukrainian children who were abducted and taken to Russia and are now advertised as up for adoption on a Russian government-linked adoption website, including one child under a false Russian identity. Financial Times confirmed the children's IDs with help of Ukrainian Child Rights Protection Center. We are awaiting further confirmation on 2 more children located by the Financial Times who we strongly believe are Ukrainian. The children's guardians and Ukraine's authorities had previously been unaware of their whereabouts. The 4 Ukrainian children were abducted from state care homes and separated from their guardians and relatives in towns across the southern and eastern regions of Ukraine that fell under the control of Russia's invading army in 2022. Ukrainian authorities estimate nearly 20,000 children have been forcibly taken from occupied territories to Russia since the full-scale invasion began in February 2022. 389 have been returned. Many thousands are still missing. Ukrainian authorities are working to confirm IDs of dozens more Ukrainian children taken to Russia who were flagged to them by the Financial Times. They are working with the relative of one child identified and located by the Financial Times to return them home to Ukraine. So, as I understand it, they took kids and essentially are putting them on the Russian equivalent of Craigslist. USYNOVITE.RU. That's the government-linked adoption website in Russia. It's one that is an adoption site that is linked to the Russian government.
Yeah, I'm speechless. I never know what to say about that stuff. It's like it's the ugliest form of genocide because you don't just kill something, you pervert it and change it from what it originally was and erase an identity and erase a person who could have been. Ah, that's disgusting. Brian, are you there? I can't hear you. Well, folks, I don't know. I can't hear Brian. Someone emoji me if I'm talking over him. But otherwise, I'll say, please retweet the space and donate
Can you hear
to
me?
our. Oh, hey, got you now, sir.
Oh, did I was reading the article. Did you hear me?
You just cut out for quite a bit, and I thought the article was done, and I went on a little bit of a soliloquy, and then I let silence flow for a little bit. So I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think what happened was they had a video embedded in the article, and it played, and then it interrupted my audio into the space. But essentially, there's this website where they've already found, a bunch of people between the New York Times, the Financial Times. They found like a bunch of kids that are validated to be Ukrainian children that were abducted, and they've just put them out there on this website to be adopted.
Yeah, and I was saying that it kind of leaves me without words besides that I think it's the most cruel and long lasting form of genocide because you're not just ending a life, you're erasing it, and you're erasing a person, and you're raising a person to hate what they were born to be. So it's just, yeah, it's that's what I was saying when we couldn't hear each other there.
Yeah, I mean, the only way I know to deal with stuff like this when I see it, and, it just things that make me angry, is to use it as fuel to try and redouble my efforts to try and put an end to this crap, right? That's the only way I know to deal with this. So those assholes are going in my slide deck for this. That Financial Times, New York Times revelation is going in my slide deck. It wasn't there before. It's going to go be there now. Now I have a video from PBS. I'm sorry, from CBS News. There was an interview where they actually found some Ukrainian children that had been repatriated away from Russia, and they were in the U.S. now, and so they were being interviewed by this journalist and the gal that does Face the Nation, the brunette. Uh, yeah, and they interview the people and they talk about how they were taken and how they were treated by the Russians, and then what they were told, and fortunately they got out. But yeah, so there's that. So it just makes me really angry, and the people who come to my session, they're gonna hear about it. They're gonna hear about it, and I would encourage people that are in this space that look at that tweet that's in the nest, tell your neighbors about it, because I guarantee you, I'll bet you a Coke Zero that they don't. Some of the people in your walks of life, neighbors and family members and coworkers, they don't know this shit's going on. They don't. They don't follow it. I had this conversation today with somebody from the church offices. I went in there I was going to go in to test out the Wi-Fi in the room. I had a conversation with one of the admins that works in the office. And we were talking about this, and I mentioned some of the stuff that was happening. She's like, "Oh, I didn't know that was happening." Now she has a roommate from college, I guess, that she keeps up with, and she's Ukrainian. They've they've lost a lot of family members. So she's not totally divorced. She does follow it, but some of the stuff that I talked about, she didn't know it been happening. Stuff that we would know in this space because we were immersed in it, right? So, yeah. So, yeah. So,
It's so hard to break the ice to bring it up. Like I sometimes, people ask me how I'm doing, and they just want to, oh good. And but what they get is, oh, I just read this article about how they're kidnapping kids and putting them on, you know, adoption Craigslist in Rusia. And like 2 sentences into my rant, I just see their eyes just widen, and so got to be more of a salesman for Ukraine, like work my way into it. But sometimes you fail and sometimes you do good, but sometimes I'm a little bit of a blunt instrument bringing it up, especially if it's an article like that gets under your skin.
yeah, and this is where you get into like, how can you start like when I went to my sales meeting, back in February, and I wore my Ukraine pin on my sport coat at the awards dinner. Uh, definitely sparked a fair amount of conversations over the course of the evening because people were curious. And yeah, but then, whether it's a bumper sticker on your car, whether it's, a garden flag, there's all kinds of ways you can kind of, show support. And then also in a I don't want to say insidious way, but on a, just expressing support that potentially could lead to conversations. I don't think that, um, uh, beyond the pale. I think it's just
No, not at all. I'm
no.
talking about like someone's like, "How are you doing?" and you're like, "They're bombing Kharkiv."
Yeah, that's
When
hard.
you jump right into
Yeah,
like that.
yeah, that's
But
tough
I
because
don't always do it.
yeah, there's no context, right? Yeah, trying to weave it into. Well, you could complain that you didn't get enough sleep last night because you were, yakking with me on Ukraine until 1 in the morning Eastern. So why are you so tired? Well, I was up late last night talking about Ukraine. Yeah, it's tough to kind of weave it into a conversation like that. So
Well, it can be. I was just making a joke that sometimes you fail bad and people just
yeah,
like, "Okay, buddy."
yeah, it's like backing away from you. It's like taking a step back. Yeah. Well, I'd be interested, if there's people in the audience that have kind of had success in terms of how to bring it up, in I would say mixed company, right? People that are maybe not immersed in this. I'd be interested in kind of techniques that maybe all have used to, when you've had the opportunity to kind of bring up Ukraine and talk about it and try to communicate what's happening. I'm sure a lot of different people have different uh, things that have happened that they've been able to kind of initiate conversations about it because it's an interesting exercise in interaction and advocacy to talk about this and try to spread the word. What I hope will happen with this session series is that if this is successful, yeah, I'm always treating it as like a pilot. Then I want to take this on the road to other churches, right? Because I mean, there's a First Baptist church right next to my church, and one of the things I talk about in the session two is the particular and targeted and systematic persecution of Christians by Russia in occupied territories, and in particular the Baptists, because they are the largest behind after the Ukrainian Orthodox. They are the largest single group um, that is present in Ukraine before the war, and then has been systematically targeted by the Russians. And I actually have an article on this topic. It's a Time magazine And what I'm going to do with this is I'm just going to read excerpts from this article. So, like, there's this guy, Azatyan. Azatyan. Sorry, Azat, if I am not pronouncing it exactly correctly. So apparently, he was a leader of a Baptist church, and so so it talks kind of when the article begins, and this was in what town was this in? Um Berdyansk in southern Ukraine, in the occupied city. So he talks, he basically, the interviewer, he basically went over the fact that he was beaten to the point where blood was coming out of his ears, and they sent electric shocks up his genitals. Um, they whacked him with pipes and truncheons and began to interrogate him about his faith. And they would ask him questions like, "When did you become a Baptist? When did you become an American spy?" He tried to explain that in Ukraine there was freedom of religion, you could choose your faith, but his torturers saw the world the same way as their predecessors at the KGB did, that the American church is just a front for the American state. And so then he was.
Because their own church is just a front for their own state. And every accusation is a confession with those guys.
Yeah. So this article kind of goes through his ordeal, and then it kind of uses that as a case study that takes a step back and look at the systematic persecution of Christians by the Russians, and then it zooms back in. So I'm going to read various excerpts from this article in that session. So he was in captivity for 43 days. So probably going to print this out and then highlight the in yellow the areas that I want to read out. So I'm not going to read the whole article for them because it would take too long, but just kind of set the tone. So because if you just go out with a PowerPoint and just do a bunch of numbers, that's not going to have the impact that it would have. You could talk about the numbers and talk about the overall sequence of events, but punctuating it with individual stories, I think, is going to be the way to really to have the maximum impact of what's happening. And then I got good guidance, I think, from TKD about that, and other people in this space. I think when we were talking about this, because I was trying to figure out how to frame this discussion, and then I got good advice in here is to sprinkle actual real human stories into this. And so I'm trying to do that in a number of ways. In particular, in the session 2, where we talk about genocide and children and the persecution of Christians. So,
yeah, I think it's a really good idea. People numb to big statistics, but you talk about little Olasia from Berdyansk, and the color of shoes she was wearing when she was abducted or hit by a missile or what any of the other things that happen, and that's definitely it opens eyes in a way that I feel like numbers just never do.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and yeah, so I think that will have the impact. I did a little bit of a trial run with my mother-in-law's husband. He's actually a former full bird colonel in the United States Army, retired, and so we went through some of the stuff here. And went through the slide deck with him, and he made some suggestions. But yeah, it was good. So yeah, so just getting a lot of feedback from people on the deck, and got some good suggestions from a Ukrainian someone who participates in the Ukrainian Association of North Carolina. She lives out in the Raleigh-Durham area, and so I sent her the deck, and she gave me some feedback that I think would help. The one particular area that I'm weak on is this whole Luhansk Donetsk sequence of events. Um, it's it's challenging, and I'm going to have the NATO chief of diplomatic mission help me with that. The kind of buttress is, I mean, the Crimea, I think I've got down. I've got down the Holodomor. I've got down, some of this other stuff. But this whole the what happened when between 2014 and the start of the war on those is challenging to kind of really understand what one thing led to another. It's all interlinked, right? So I got some work to do on that. So but I've got a fair amount of time left, so to get to kind of fine tune things, and I'm already working on session 2 before session 1. Probably a couple weeks before we do session 2, because you got July 4th week, you got July 4th week, and then I'm going to be traveling on the 27th there, so it'll be a couple weeks before between session 1 and session 2, but that'll buy me some more time. So,
well, I'll segue into a personal story, not personally personal to myself, but a more human interest story about Ukraine that you could possibly, an example of something you could bring in. So this is an article from ukraineworld.org, one of my favorite websites, published today. And it is by Lisa Zulai, and she's a journalist at Ukraine World. So, in memoriam of Mykola Rachok, all-encompassing light of many. His sister and best friend Irena recall Mykola Rachok, a journalist, philosopher, poet, and soldier who volunteered to defend Ukraine and was killed in combat. And I actually made a tweet about this that I can put in the nest right now while I stall a little bit. Mykola Rachok was a journalist, and there it is. It's the first tweet in the nest. There's some nice pictures of him in it if you want to follow along. So one of the first things Mykola told his loved ones when he arrived home on a visit from the front lines was that he now felt happiest at war. This was such a relief for his family, who had accepted his decision to join the armed forces with natural unease. As he left on one of the first buses headed for the front in 2022, Mykola was unable to contain his excitement about what he saw. While on the way, he called his sister and best friend Antonia to share his positive picture with her. He was surrounded by strong, dedicated people of different ages who had chosen to defend their ideals. It all seemed right for him, his life among theirs. I am extremely proud of Kolya. He chose to defend Ukraine without hesitation. However, throughout his whole time in service, I only saw him in uniform in a photo. At one point, he had come back home for a little while. While we were waiting for him, I had imagined him coming home so many times, always in uniform. He arrived, but not at all as I had expected. He stepped out of the car looking well-groomed and neatly dressed, wearing linen trousers and a white striped linen shirt, carrying his familiar, beautiful scent. It was because he didn't want to bring the war back home with him, recalls Antonia, who never refers to Mykola in the past tense. Mykola had a point of ensuring that his loved ones did not associate him with war. Of course, they talked about his military service, but at these precious moments with the family became rare. He decided to erase the reason for it from their lives, at least for a while. Pardon me. Antonia reveals that she was worried that this war would lock Mykola up, as caring and easygoing as he was. To prevent this, she had to get through his personal defenses, the same way he broke the enemy's defenses at war. He always said he was fine. However, there was moments when I could see he was struggling. I openly insisted that he share his feelings. When he did, we both realized it was worth it. A witness to Nicola's fellow soldiers' experience burnout. She wondered if her brother's inner light would lead him through the darkness until now. The last time they spoke, he seemed to still have it. The casual talk, which appeared to be Antonia and Nicola's last conversation, occurred just a day before he was killed on July 19th, 2022, at 27 years of age. When he called, I was getting a pedicure. That day, he was able to video call. He even laughed at the girlish color I had chosen. That was our last moment together, and now I think it was somewhat ridiculous talk to have been our last one. At that point, she did not know that she would still be in touch with her brother, but in a special way. As a person passionate about writing, Nicola left many notes, articles both half-written and finished, some poetry, and most personal, his diary. In autumn, when Antonia came to Nicola's old apartment, which she had locked up since he left for war, she collected it all with the only care with the care only a sister could have. Even though there is hardly a thing Antonia did not know about her brother, what she found in his writings, never published or shown, revealed something else to her. His thoughts' birth, the way he put words, the way he chose them, and of course the physical traces of his hand, felt in each piece, kept his presence alive. That day in October, I allowed myself to simply take all his diaries home, to read them with our parents, and read them many times, of course. I said, Kolya, whether this makes you angry or not, this might clear some things up for me now. And so I did it. Voluntarily shared or not, Nicola's written legacy has allowed his loved ones to understand his life through his eyes, which Antonia describes as olive green. He wanted the world to be just. This was always clear to all who knew him. However, his talking to himself on paper showed that everything Nicola knew in life was perceived through the prism of justice. It was not simply one of the thoughts on his mind, but a virtue that was an integral part of his own soul. Among many other things, he was always wearing t-shirts and trousers, keen interest into retro cars, love of solo walks around cave at dawn, refined manners, ability to understand people at their lowest, interest in looking for keys for anyone, never judging and always caring. His nature made him look to many like a man from the centuries past, if not from another world. Sometimes the translations are a bit clumsy on these guys, so if I stumble, it's usually me trying to reform their sentences midway. Nicola was such a gentleman that shared our friends, and I that are shared friends, and I kindly teased him that he was a perfect boyfriend to introduce to any mom. Irena, his other best friend, recalls with a smile. Looking at her open tight balcony, she longs for him the most, as it is the place where she would like to drink port wine with him and talk or just listen to the same old music. Kolya liked the apartment where I live, especially my balcony. We had a tradition. Whenever we decided to drink, it was usually port wine. He once told me about how he sat alone on a balcony in Porto doing just that. Over time, he got me accustomed to this drink, and it became our thing. When he went to war, I had this fantasy about us sitting on my balcony, sharing a glass of port, while we recounted his adventures at the front. If he wouldn't mind, of course. Sadly, that never came to be. After Nicola passed away, Irena brought this dream to life alone. Luckily, there was a song that still accompanies her during this ritual, making her feel as if he was truly there by her side. During our first trip to Zadelgach, a deep spiritual connection formed between us. We were with a large group, and the boys had to leave a bit earlier. My friend and I walked them to the pier to catch the ferry. Near the tent camp, there was a stall with the bar and snacks playing very good music. Kolya was a music connoisseur, and I always paid attention to the songs too. When I hugged him goodbye, the song In the End by the Cranberries was playing. You know, some life moments have soundtracks, and that was it. I added the song to my playlist, but never listened to it until after Kolya's death. Then I re-listened to the entire album and read about its creation, as it held a strong musical association for me. I even bought it on vinyl. Antonia also has her things which she will forever associate with Mikola. For example, Eric Maria Remarque's classic novel, Three Comrades. Kolya, perhaps a bit shy, once mentioned that he wanted to be like Odo Kester. I completely understand him, and I also admire that character. Nikola's love of books was great and sincere. In addition to writing as a journalist for the Ukrainian outlets Infokar and Kunst, and for himself, he used to read a lot and dreamt about owning a bookshop in Kyiv, designed in a sophisticated English style. Now he has one in his native Venetia. I don't know. Oh, maybe I'm not sure what that sentence meant. A while ago, he and I had a detailed discussion about what the bookstore would be like. His favorite color was navy blue, and we took his preferences into account, not only for the design, but also for the content. We work with publishing houses he loved and avoid those with bad reputations. For example, some publishing houses had delayed payments to his acquaintances, which he disapproved of. Named Heroi, it contains photos of Mikola. Now I understand this strange translation. Looks like Antonia started a bookstore in his name, is what she's saying. So it's named Heroi. It contains photos of Mikola and books about some of the soldiers he used to know. There are actually a great deal more books, but the shop's origins and the current times make its military theme unavoidable. Irena also frequently visits the shop in Venetia. Although she and Mikola first met in Kyiv, studying at the same Faculty of Humanities, Venetia is both their hometown and is where their friendship really blossomed. Antonia said that Mikola revealed many secrets, locations in Kyiv to her and many of his friends. Ironically for Irena, he helped her really discover the city they were both born in. There's a spot in Venetia where the South Bug River flows, an informal place where someone has built a platform over the water. You can sit there, hang your legs over the edge, and enjoy the beautiful green landscape. That's what we did. I've tried several times to find it again without Kolya, but I can't remember the way we got there. Now it's somewhat hidden from me. However, some things on the contrary became clear to Irena only after Mikola's death. His poetry is one of them. I didn't know he actually wrote poetry. All I know was about his desire to open a bookstore and his love for literature. I was also surprised to learn that he wanted to volunteer with the Ukrainer project and felt like he wasn't good enough for it. Many personal details emerged when I talked to Mikola's family about him. Death leaves a lot of empty space for wandering through the labyrinths of what was known or left of the departed, and for attempts to revisit some moments. The wounds can become even deeper if one does not accept the limits of what one knows, as Mikola's sister did. I realize that much of what I know about Kolya's time in the army comes from his comrades, presented to me as a sort of demo version, like, take this and know that. I understand they meant well. No one wants to come to your house carrying a fallen child and share some true but perhaps hurtful facts. However, there is something that will not leave her mind that only Mikola could make sense of for her. I don't know how it may sound, but after his passing, I saw that he was in a hurry to live. At some point, he said he wanted to make as much of his life as possible. A bit over a year before the war, he became determined to resolve all his unfinished business. During that time, he pursued Asian martial arts, learned tango, started doing voiceover work, and finished all the articles he had begun. Ensuring a good old age for our parents was always important to us, so Kolya took them to Rome. Looking back, it seems either he was prepared for what was coming or he foresaw the potential events in Ukraine. He even declined to be a godfather to my son, saying he might not be able to be there for the child, and that this role was very important. Mikola was very active, and this behavior might have seemed normal back then. However, after his death, it took on the appearance of a fatum behind his back, and him having a sense of the great design all along. Antonia later convinced Mikola to become her son's godfather, and her son had the chance to know him that way, even though he was very young. Now Antonia hopes he grows up as a kind and understand as kind and understanding as his uncle. There's this all-encompassing light in Kolya that touches everyone who communicated with him. When you met him, you couldn't imagine wanting him to disappear from your life. Thus, Antonia and many other people who love Mykola do as much as they can to ensure that he remains in the world. Lisa Zulai, journalist at Ukraine World. That's a tough one, but yeah, Ukraine loses its best and brightest every day, and we gotta make it stop as soon as we can, Brian.
Yeah, because I mean, these are people that are going to be the future of Ukraine, right? After this is over. So, we don't want them to lose their best and brightest. So that's why we need to be redoubling our efforts to help them. So, I appreciate that. Probably time for a reset. 11:10 Eastern U.S. So you're listening to the Maria Report. This is a 24-hour, 7-day a week, 365 days a year space, which is devoted to this is the only continuous space that is devoted to the war in Ukraine. We offer updates, we offer commentary, we offer guest speakers, we offer information, we offer dialogue, and opinions on this war and geopolitical topics related to this war. So we appreciate that you have taken the time to join us here. We're all volunteers. We come out here and with volunteer co-hosts, and it's really interesting, having been a relatively become a co-host relatively recently, to see some of how the sausage is made, and really just the incredible coordination amongst the various co-hosts from around the world, that we look to schedule the co-host, and to make sure that each shift is covered, and so we really appreciate it. Please share and retweet this space. This is absolutely helpful to us to uh, to get more people in here, get more people engaged, more people participating in the conversation. It's always helpful, and yeah, so we're just very grateful that you're here. You could be doing anything with your time. And one of the things that continues to amaze me, Adam, is that it hadn't occurred to me as many times as I come into this space, is that there are people in Ukraine listening to this, right? That but even people in the Ukraine military, and maybe not necessarily on the zero line, but people that are maybe just have us on in the background, right? Alan mentioned that a few months ago, and it just until he said it, it hadn't occurred to me. But I guess it makes sense, right? I mean, as long as you have an internet connection and a Twitter account, or not even that, because you can listen on YouTube, right? So interesting.
Yeah, and it's a great community too, but I think they're listening to us in the background right now, Brian, because they're not talking to us. But that's okay. Do you have another story you were thinking about this evening?
Yeah. So there was another article that I saved that I found interesting. Let me pull up my bookmarks here. I didn't re-up my premium, so I don't. My paid membership, so I don't have. I can't categorize my and do a file folders for my bookmarks like I used to there, but that's okay. Um, so yeah, this was an interesting article that was in Next Up. The largest buyer of Russian gas in the EU has canceled its contract with Russia. Did you hear this?
No, I did not. That's awesome. And coupled with these new sanctions and what Ruble doing, it sounds like good news.
Yeah, what ruble doing is going down, tanking. German gas giant Uniper has announced that it has terminated long-term gas supply contracts with Gazprom. So I guess Gazprom is the Russian state-affiliated gas company. The company decided to break the contract after a favorable decision in the arbitration court. The court awarded Uniper more than 13 billion euros in compensation for non-delivery of gas. What happened after the explosion of the Nord Stream gas pipeline? The episode was recognized by the court as a force majeure. This contract was to be valid for another 10 years until 2035. And then it says, Beefeater chimes in and says, mainstream media is again failing to report the context and the profits made by Western companies who chose to remain and support the genocide of Ukrainians. Read this before you congratulate Uniper. They have funded death and destruction in Ukraine and should be castigated, not celebrated. So he's putting this into context there, that, it's great that that they have canceled this contract, but their money up to this point has helped fund this war machine, right? So I get where Uniper's coming from, but at the same time, this is very bad news, right, for Russia to have this contract canceled.
Yeah, and it's, I guess, better late than never, but I hope it signals more, a domino effect on these contracts, especially as Europe makes the slow journey to being more independent of them through, LNG from the States and other places. So hopefully it continues.
There's this other article that I'm going to put in the nest that I found just absolutely hilarious. So, humiliated by the failure of its hypersonic weapons, the wildly corrupt Putin regime now feels compelled to arrest leading Russian scientists involved in hypersonic weapon R&D. So I guess, they're blaming these physicists. They're blaming them. They're charging them with treason. A string of Russian physicists working on the science underlying the hypersonic missiles have been charged with treason and imprisoned in recent years in what rights groups see as an overzealous crackdown. Most of those arrested are elderly, and 3 are now dead. One was taken from his hospital bed in the late stages of cancer and died soon thereafter. Another is Vladislav Galkin, a 68-year-old academic whose home in Tomsk in southern Russia was raided in April 2023. Armed men in black masks arrived at 4 a.m., digging through cupboards and seizing papers with scientific formulas on them. Let's see. FSB has
Evil eats itself.
FSB has forbidden her from speaking about his wife from speaking about the case. Since 2015, 12 physicists have been arrested who were all associated in some way with hypersonic technology or with the institutions that work on it. They are all charged with high treason, which can include passing state secrets to foreign countries. Russian treason trials are held behind closed doors. Not clear exactly what they've been accused of, but I think it sounds like there's some copium that these missiles have not had the effect in Ukraine as was hoped for, I guess, by the Russians, right? Because we all remember that Patriot missile taken down, because that was the first time, right? Hypersonic missile was taken down by a Patriot, and that was really the first time in history. And we saw that, and there had to be, obviously, that must have been a significant embarrassment for the Russians, because otherwise they wouldn't be turning around and arresting all these physicists and saying, "Hey, homie, you this shit isn't supposed to happen." They're not supposed to be able to just shoot down these hypersonic missiles that y'all worked on, right?
That's just how it works. It's a Swiss cheese of corruption. everyone's taking their part, taking their little chunk off the top to bottom, from the janitor to the CEO. And when heads roll in a system like that, it's always just for show. It's an aesthetic pageantry of, oh, we found the culprit, but the culprit's the system. The culprits that none of them are giving are, they're all siphoning. And so one scientist who was probably corrupt and probably did him buy himself a Mercedes from Germany with the extra money that should have went, that he diverted from his project funds, but his boss probably took more than him, and his underlings took just a little bit less than him, and everyone skims and skims and skims. And so when these purges happen, it's hilarious because it's all just political maneuvers, and you know who pooped in whose cornflakes last week and had a bad word with the boss or whatever. And so they just kind of do this, and then they wipe their hands like, oh yeah, we fixed the problem, it was this one guy. No, it's your entire culture and society, folks.
Yeah, and I guess we'll never know if this was just not even necessarily corruption. It was just that they sent these people on an impossible task to do, right? That yeah, you made a hypersonic missile, because the whole point of this was, it wasn't just the fact that they were hypersonic. The fact was, could it be controlled in flight, right? I think that was the thing. I remember we were in spaces, the Balmer report. We were in there. I was in there, and we had a guy on there who had some expertise in this area, and lots of stuff could be hypersonic, but the issue is, can it be hypersonic, and then you actually have the ability to steer it. I think that's the thing with hypersonic missiles. I'm not a military expert. I stayed at a Holiday Inn Express last night. Actually, I'm kidding.
That
I didn't do
that
that.
scans with what I've heard on the space.
Yeah, yeah. So my thing is, yeah. And so, could it be that these people were sent on a fool's errand because they were
Brian?
told to make this hyper weapon? Yes.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. I don't think you guys saw it. Host connection issue. That's all I just really want to go on and come up and say.
Okay. Yeah. So if we
That is
if
the
we lose,
stupidest band name.
so if so if the so if the space crashes, then we'll restart, guys. So if that when that message comes up, sometimes the space goes belly up. So if it does, then just blame it on Adam, and we'll get the space rebooted there in a little bit. So if it cuts out, it wasn't us. It might have been Adam, but it wasn't us. So